As the night settles in, so can you. Let us know in the comments, where are you listening this and what is your current time. After that, close your eyes if you like. Nothing we're about to discuss is urgent or even particularly interesting. And let us begin. In medieval Europe, the fashion police were not just a metaphorical concept. They were the real deal, with actual laws that dictated who could wear what and when. These were the sumptuary laws, a bizarre blend of fashion statement and legal mandate, ensuring that your wardrobe was as much a reflection of your social status as it was of your personal style, or lack thereof. So, if you ever thought today's dress codes were stifling, just wait until you hear about the medieval version. Now, let's be clear. These laws weren't just about keeping people in burlap sackcloth while the nobility swanned around in silks. No, they were much more insidious. Sumptuary laws were about maintaining the social order, keeping the riffraff in their place, and making sure everyone knew just where they stood, or rather, where they couldn't stand, based on their attire. Imagine being fined because you dared don a fur robe, or even worse, being tossed in the stocks for wearing the wrong shade of purple. Yes, purple. Because in medieval Europe, not all colours were created equal. Take England, for example. The Statute of Apparel, enacted in 1363 by that fashion-forward monarch, King Edward III, set down a veritable laundry list of do's and don'ts for the English populace. The statute specified that only the royal family could wear cloth of gold and purple silk. Now, most of us today might associate gold with bling and purple with royalty, but in the 14th century, these colours were a literal status symbol. If you were caught in purple silk and you weren't of royal blood, you were basically impersonating royalty, an offence that could lead to hefty fines or worse. The reasoning? Well, it was partly economic. Silk and gold were expensive, and they wanted to keep the upper crust exclusive and their wealth visible. But these laws were also about social engineering. By dictating what people could wear, the ruling class reinforced the rigid social hierarchy of the time. If you were a peasant, your dress made sure you were instantly visible as such. Heaven forbid a lowly merchant should be mistaken for a nobleman at a glance. That would be chaos, wouldn't it? But let's not think this was just an English obsession. Across the continent, similar laws were cropping up. In Florence, those stylish Italians had their own take on sumptuary laws, targeting everything from the length of shoes to the opulence of wedding dresses. In 1330, a Florentine law set limits on the number of pearls on a bride's gown, because, of course, it was crucial to keep those pearl imports in check while ensuring no bride outshone her social betters on her big day. You might be wondering, did people actually follow these rules? Well, in theory, yes. In practice, it was a bit more complicated. The wealthy often found creative ways around the laws, sometimes through bribes or by exploiting loopholes. And let's face it, a rich merchant who wanted to flaunt his newfound wealth was not going to let a little thing like legal restrictions stop him. But the less fortunate didn't have such luxuries. For them, breaking a sumptuary law wasn't just a fashion faux pas, it was a risk, one with potentially severe consequences. Let's delve deeper into the strange case of French sumptuary laws under King Charles VI, known affectionately as Charles the Mad. He imposed regulations that dictated not just the fabric and colour, but even the style of one's clothing. In 1399, a law was passed limiting the length of men's shoes to 2.5 feet. Yes, you heard that right. The length of your shoe could land you in trouble. Why? Because excessively long shoes were seen as an extravagant display of wealth and thus inappropriate for anyone but the highest nobility. But perhaps the most notorious aspect of these laws was their enforcement. Picture a medieval fashion enforcer, perhaps a bit like a stern schoolmaster, patrolling the markets and public gatherings, ready to pounce on anyone daring enough to wear a forbidden garment. In reality, though, enforcement was sporadic. It was difficult to catch everyone, and even when culprits were caught, punishments varied widely, from fines to public shaming. Sometimes the punishment was more about making an example than anything else. Now, sumptuary laws might sound like a power trip by the elite, and they were. But they also reflected deeper societal anxieties. As cities grew and commerce expanded, the lines between social classes began to blur. Wealthy merchants started dressing like nobility, and heaven forbid, some even married into noble families. The horror! The laws were a desperate attempt by the traditional ruling classes to maintain their grip on power and to keep society stratified according to their liking. In a way, these laws were both a symptom and a tool of the times. They highlight the tension between tradition and change, between old money and new, and between the rigid class structures of the past and the emerging social mobility of the future. In this context, fashion wasn't frivolous, it was a battleground, and every velvet tunic or silk gown was a soldier in the fight for status and recognition. So, next time you complain about your office's casual Friday policy, remember that at least you won't be sentenced to the stocks for wearing the wrong colour tie. Medieval sumptuary laws might seem absurd from our modern perspective, but they were deadly serious to those who lived under them. As we unravel these tangled threads of history, it's clear that what we wear has always been about more than just keeping warm. It's about identity, power, and the complex tapestry of human society. And speaking of peculiar laws, let's pivot from the medieval catwalk to the courtroom, where the accused might very well be a cow, a pig, or even a rooster. Yes, folks, we're diving headfirst into the bizarre world of medieval animal trials. It sounds like something out of a Monty Python sketch, but trust me, this was very much a reality in medieval Europe. It was a time when the line between human and animal justice was not just blurred, it was practically non-existent. So, how did we get here? Why were pigs subpoenaed to stand trial, and why did chickens find themselves in the dock? First, let's set the stage. Medieval towns were bustling, chaotic places, with animals roaming the streets as freely as people. In such an environment, it's no wonder the townsfolk felt the need to impose some semblance of order. Enter the animal trials, a peculiar blend of legal proceedings and public spectacle. These trials were not just whimsical diversions. They were serious business, often overseen by a judge and jury, with the accused animal represented by a defense attorney. Picture a pig snuffling in its pen while a lawyer earnestly pleads its case. It sounds absurd, but there was a bizarre logic to it. These trials served a dual purpose. They were both a form of entertainment and a moral lesson for the community. By holding animals accountable, medieval societies reinforced the idea that everyone, man or beast, was subject to the law. Let's take a closer look at one notable case, the trial of a pig in Falaise, France, in 1386. This pig was accused of killing a child, and in a grim reflection of the era's justice system, it was sentenced to death by hanging. The execution was carried out with all the solemnity of a human execution, complete with a public procession. The cost of the pig's execution attire, including a new pair of gloves for the hangman, was meticulously recorded in the town's accounts. It was a costly affair, underscoring the seriousness with which these trials were treated. But why such a fuss over a pig? The answer lies in the medieval worldview, which saw the cosmos as a grand moral order. Animals, like humans, were expected to adhere to this order. When an animal transgressed, it was perceived as a threat to the community's moral fabric. By trying and punishing the offender, the town reaffirmed its commitment to maintaining moral order and deterring future misdeeds, whether by animals or humans. Of course, not all cases ended with a trip to the gallows. In some instances, animals were acquitted or had their sentences commuted. In 1457, a sow and her piglets were put on trial in Savigny, France, for allegedly attacking a man. The sow was found guilty and executed, but the piglets were acquitted due to their youth and lack of evidence against them. Talk about a lucky break. But it's not just pigs that found themselves in hot water. Roosters, too, were occasionally dragged before the bench. One famous case took place in Basel, Switzerland, in 1474, when a rooster was accused of the heinous crime of laying an egg. Now, before you roll your eyes, consider the medieval mindset. A rooster laying an egg was viewed as an unnatural act, possibly linked to witchcraft. The poor bird was tried and, unsurprisingly, found guilty. It was sentenced to be burned at the stake, a grim reminder of the era's fear of the unnatural. These trials were more than just curious footnotes in history. They offer a window into the medieval psyche, revealing a world where superstition and morality were deeply intertwined. By holding animals accountable, medieval society sought to impose order on a chaotic world, using the trials as a means of reinforcing social norms and moral values. The trials also served as a form of public theatre, drawing crowds eager for a spectacle. In a world without Netflix, a courtroom drama featuring a goat or a rooster was a welcome diversion. The trials provided a communal experience, a chance for townsfolk to gather, gossip, and engage in a shared ritual of justice, albeit one with a decidedly strange twist. But let's not romanticize these proceedings too much. While there's an undeniable charm to the idea of a pig in the dock, the harsh reality is that these trials often reflected the brutal and arbitrary nature of medieval justice. Animals were easy scapegoats, and their trials served as a convenient distraction from the more pressing issues of the day, such as poverty, disease, and social unrest. By focusing on the misdeeds of a chicken, towns could momentarily ignore the deeper problems plaguing their communities. In examining these trials, it's clear that medieval justice was as much about spectacle as it was about law. The proceedings were theatrical and moralistic, designed to reinforce the societal order and entertain the masses. And yet, they also reveal the anxieties and fears of a society grappling with forces beyond its control, a world where chaos lurked just beneath the surface, threatening to upend the fragile balance of everyday life. As we continue our journey through the strange laws of medieval Europe, it's worth pondering how these peculiar practices echo in our modern world. After all, while we no longer put pigs on trial, the desire to impose order on chaos to make sense of the absurd remains a fundamental part of the human experience. So, next time you're caught in the chaos of modern life, remember that our medieval ancestors faced their own brand of madness, and perhaps take comfort in the fact that at least you're not defending a rooster in court. Stay tuned, because there's more to explore in the wild world of medieval justice. And speaking of medieval madness, let's dive into the next courtroom curiosity, trial by ordeal. If you thought animal trials were medieval Europe's oddest legal invention, hold on to your pointed hats, because we're about to plunge into the fire and water of justice, literally. Imagine a justice system where your guilt or innocence could be determined by how well you handle a hot iron or avoid drowning. Welcome to the world of trial by ordeal, where the laws of physics and the winds of fate decided your destiny. This wasn't some niche practice reserved for the most sensational cases. No, trial by ordeal was a cornerstone of medieval justice, used from the early Middle Ages until it began to fall out of favour in the 13th century. So, how did these ordeals work? Picture this. You've been accused of a crime, and the local court decides that the truth will be revealed through divine intervention. You're handed a scorching iron to carry a few paces, or perhaps tossed into a river, bound hand and foot. If you emerged unscathed or managed not to sink, it was believed that God had spoken in your favour. If not, well, let's just say your prospects weren't looking too hot, unless you count the burn marks. And don't be fooled into thinking this was a low-budget production. The ordeal could be quite the event, with the whole village turning out to witness the spectacle. Take the ordeal of fire, for instance. You'd have to walk a certain distance clutching a red-hot iron bar, and then your burns were inspected a few days later. If they healed cleanly, divine intervention was assumed. If they festered, you were out of luck. Now, you might be wondering, why would anyone have faith in such a system? Well, the medieval mindset was a curious blend of superstition, religious fervour, and a desperate need for order in a chaotic world. These trials by ordeal were seen as a way to let the divine step in and sort out human messes. It was a world where the supernatural was as real as the ground beneath your feet, and the idea of God as the ultimate judge was deeply comforting, or terrifying, depending on which side of the ordeal you were on. Consider the infamous case of Emma of Normandy, the Queen Consort of England, who in 1040 was accused of adultery. To prove her innocence, Emma underwent the ordeal of walking barefoot over red-hot ploughshares. She emerged miraculously unscathed, a testament to her supposed purity, and perhaps a nod to some well-placed political allies. Her unburnt feet were as much a statement of divine justice as they were a reflection of her status and influence. But let's not romanticize this practice too much. Despite its mystical veneer, trial by ordeal was often more about reinforcing social hierarchies than dispensing true justice. The powerful could sometimes sway the outcome, while the powerless bore the brunt of this divine lottery. In reality, the ordeal was as much about maintaining societal control as it was about seeking truth. So, how did this curious practice eventually fall out of favour? As Europe moved into the High Middle Ages, legal systems began to evolve, influenced by growing intellectual movements and the rediscovery of Roman law. The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 played a significant role, prohibiting clergy from participating in ordeals. This ecclesiastical withdrawal undermined the trial's perceived legitimacy, as the Church's seal of approval was crucial for their continuation. By the 13th century, ordeals were increasingly replaced by more rational forms of trial, such as by jury or written evidence. This shift was part of a broader trend towards more structured legal procedures and the gradual professionalization of the legal system. While the idea of divine intervention in justice didn't completely disappear, it was increasingly viewed with skepticism. But why did medieval societies cling to such a seemingly irrational approach for so long? The answer lies in the medieval psyche itself. In a world where disease, famine, and war were constant companions, the idea that a higher power could intervene in human affairs was a comforting thought. It offered a semblance of control over the uncontrollable, a way to make sense of the chaos. And let's not forget the community aspect. These ordeals were public events, drawing crowds and reinforcing social bonds. In a time before mass media, they were both a form of entertainment and a communal experience, allowing the townsfolk to witness the divine hand at work, or at least the spectacle of it. Of course, the perceived infallibility of these trials was more than a little dubious. The outcomes were often manipulated or conveniently interpreted to suit the needs of the powerful. In some cases, priests involved in the ordeals were known to subtly tilt the scales in favor of certain outcomes, ensuring that the miracle matched societal expectations or political necessities. Yet, despite their evident flaws, ordeals remained a staple of medieval justice for centuries. They encapsulate the era's unique blend of faith, superstition, and legal practice, a world where the divine was always just a step away, waiting to tip the scales of justice. These trials were less about discerning truth and more about upholding a system that was as much about belief as it was about law. As we peel back the layers of history, the story of trial by ordeal reveals a society grappling with the unknown, seeking certainty in a world that offered little of it. It's a testament to the enduring human desire to find order in chaos, to impose a narrative on the randomness of life. And while the hot irons and cold rivers of trial by ordeal have long since cooled, the questions they raise about justice, power, and belief remain as relevant today as they were 1,000 years ago. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the labyrinth of medieval law, where the next twist might just involve a peculiar punishment or a forgotten legal loophole. The journey through history is full of surprises, and who knows what strange practices we'll uncover next. And speaking of surprises, let's waltz over to the medieval altar, where marriage laws were as tangled as a knight's chainmail after a long day on the battlefield. Forget about the dreamy notion of love at first sight. In medieval Europe, marriage was less about romance and more about alliances, property, and, let's face it, survival. First off, we need to talk about age. If you think today's celebrity age gaps are eyebrow-raising, medieval Europe would have made your jaw drop. The Church, which had its fingers in just about every pie imaginable, decreed that girls could marry at the tender age of 12 and boys at 14. Yes, you heard that right. These were not ages at which anyone was prepared to understand the concept of "till death do us part," but more about "till our family's wealth and power are secured." But why so young? It wasn't about youthful exuberance, it was about securing alliances as soon as humanly possible. In a world where life expectancy hovered around 30 to 40 years, waiting for true love was about as practical as expecting a dragon to guard your castle. Marriages were strategic moves on the chessboard of medieval politics, often arranged before the kids were even out of cradle and onto their first pony. Now, let's sprinkle in a dash of economics. Marriages were also a way to consolidate wealth and land. Picture this. You're a minor noble with a decent patch of land and a modest castle. Your neighbour has a daughter and a couple of promising acres. Cue the negotiations. If your son marries their daughter, voila, more land, more power, and possibly even a stronger claim to some disputed territories. It was less about hearts and flowers, more about cows and harvests. But here's the kicker. Consent was, shall we say, a flexible concept. The Church's insistence on the necessity of mutual consent was often more honoured in the breach than the observance. In practice, the consent of the families often took precedence over the bride and groom's personal feelings. It was a bit like being told you can choose your meal, but only after the menu's been decided for you. Power dynamics played a hefty role too. Marriages were about maintaining or enhancing social status. A noble could marry down if there was enough cash on the table, while a wealthy merchant might marry up if the family coffers were deep enough to impress a financially strained, noble family. In this peculiar dance, love was often left standing awkwardly by the punch bowl. Take the case of Margaret Beaufort, mother of Henry VII, the first Tudor King of England. Married at the ripe old age of 12 to Edmund Tudor, she was pregnant by 13 and a widow by 14. Her life was a masterclass in medieval resilience and a stark reminder that marriage was often less about personal happiness and more about dynastic ambition. And let's not forget the role of dowries. These were not just a sweetener for the marriage deal, but a crucial part of the economic transaction. A hefty dowry could make even the least appealing match look like a golden opportunity. The dowry system was a way to ensure that a daughter was financially provided for, and the groom was rewarded for taking on the responsibility. In essence, it was a financial package deal, complete with bonuses and future prospects. But before you get too misty-eyed about the joys of medieval matchmaking, let's debunk a myth. The notion of the chivalrous knight rescuing his damsel from an unhappy marriage is largely fiction. In reality, the power dynamics in marriages could be as oppressive as a castle dungeon. Women, especially noble women, often found themselves pawns in their family's ambitions, with little say in matters of their own marital destiny. And yet, this system wasn't entirely without its merits, at least from a pragmatic perspective. These alliances often brought stability and peace between warring factions. By marrying off their progeny, families could forge alliances that would bring an end to long-standing feuds, unite territories, and create new power bases. It was a social contract that, while deeply flawed by modern standards, served its purpose in a world where survival often depended on who you knew and who you were married to. In the end, medieval marriage laws were as much about survival as they were about social order. They reflected a world where personal desires were often sacrificed on the altar of family duty, where the heart took a backseat to the head, and where love was a luxury few could afford. And while the romantic myths of knights and fair maidens continue to enchant us, the reality was often a stark reminder that in the game of medieval power, the stakes were high, and love was often the first casualty. As we continue our journey through these peculiar laws, we'll uncover more about how these unions shape the fabric of medieval society, affecting everything from property rights to social mobility. So, hold on to your chainmail, because the twists and turns of medieval love, or lack thereof, are far from over. Stay tuned, because the next chapter of our exploration is set to reveal even more about the tangled web of medieval life. And so, with the ink barely dry on the medieval marriage contracts, let's zoom out and take a panoramic view of the peculiar legal landscape we've been traipsing through. Medieval Europe, with all its curious laws and customs, was essentially an ongoing experiment in control, a grand, chaotic attempt to impose order on a world that often seemed determined to remain untamed. It was a time when laws were as much about managing societal chaos as they were about justice, and sometimes they were just plain bizarre. Consider the sheer variety of laws we've explored, from sumptuary edicts that told you what you could wear — purple was for the elite, remember — to animal trials where pigs faced the gallows with all the solemnity of a Shakespearean tragedy. And let's not forget the medieval courtroom's pièce de résistance, trial by ordeal, where your innocence depended on how well you handled scalding hot irons or drowned in a river. These laws, as quirky and unfathomable as they may seem today, were deeply rooted in a society that craved structure amid the storm. Why such a tight grip on the reins, you ask? Well, medieval Europe was akin to a powder keg with a penchant for spontaneous combustion. Between the Black Death, Viking raids, and the 100 Years' War, life was, in a word, unpredictable. Laws were the medieval answer to chaos, a way to draw sharp lines in the sand and shout to the heavens, "Here lies order." They were the medieval equivalent of posting a stern "No Trespassing" sign on the universe's front lawn. Now, let's talk about the economics of it all. These laws weren't just whimsical dictates, they were often cold, hard calculations. Take sumptuary laws, for instance. They weren't just about keeping the peasants in drab browns and greys while the nobility flaunted their gold-threaded finery. They were about protecting local industries and regulating the lavish spending that could drain a kingdom's coffers faster than a tax collector at a jousting tournament. Wearing silk was practically an economic declaration, a visible sign of wealth that could destabilize markets if left unchecked. But perhaps the most interesting aspect is how these laws reflect the human psyche's eternal quest for fairness and justice. You see, beneath the layers of absurdity and harshness, these legal systems were trying to answer the same questions we grapple with today. What's fair? What's just? And who gets to decide? Sure, the answers back then might have involved a few more pigs in the dock, but the heart of the matter remains unchanged. Fast forward to today, and you'll find echoes of medieval law in our modern legal systems. The shift from trial by ordeal to trial by jury, for example, was a significant step towards a more rational justice system. Though let's be honest, sometimes modern trials still feel like a game of chance. And the notion of sumptuary laws? Well, while we don't have inspectors measuring shoe lengths anymore, dress codes still exist, subtly dictating who can wear what in certain social settings. But perhaps the most enduring legacy is the idea that laws are living entities, evolving with society's needs and fears. Just as medieval lawmakers tried to mould their chaotic world with the tools they had, we continue to adapt our legal frameworks to the ever-shifting sands of modern life. The quest for order and fairness is as timeless as it is elusive, a testament to the enduring nature of human endeavour. And what about those romantic myths we've been debunking along the way? The chivalrous knights, the damsels in distress, the noble courts dispensing justice with a divine touch? They endure not because they are true, but because they speak to our desire for a world where good triumphs over evil, where love conquers all, and where justice isn't just a concept, but a living, breathing reality. Yet, the harsh truths of medieval life remind us that reality often demands compromise, negotiation, and a healthy dose of skepticism. As we wrap up this exploration of medieval law, let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer audacity of it all. The attempts to legislate morality, control fashion, and even hold animals accountable for their actions were all part of a larger narrative. A narrative that speaks to our shared history of grappling with the complexities of human nature. It's a history that reminds us that while we may no longer hang pigs or decide innocence by fire, the pursuit of order in a disorderly world is an age-old dance, one that continues to shape our lives and our laws. So, as you lay down tonight, pondering the tapestry of history we've woven together, remember that the medieval world, with all its strange laws and customs, was not so different from our own. It was a world striving for meaning in the madness, seeking to carve out a semblance of order from the chaos. And if nothing else, it serves as a reminder that our quest for fairness and justice is a journey without end, one that continues to challenge and inspire us across the ages. Sleep well, knowing that at least tonight no pigs are on trial, and the only ordeal you face is finding a comfortable spot on your pillow. Welcome to the world of the ancient Mayans, where mathematics wasn't just a subject you dreaded in school, but a sophisticated system that would make even your most number-savvy friend do a double-take. Forget the idea of Mayans as mysterious calendar makers wrapped in mysticism. These folks were practical mathematicians who could crunch numbers like nobody's business. Their numerical system, based on a vigesimal, that's base 20 for you non-mathletes out there structure, was a marvel of simplicity and functionality. Now, if you're scratching your head wondering why base 20, just think about counting on your fingers and toes. Makes more sense now, doesn't it? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into the Mayan number party, let's acknowledge the real unsung hero here, the number 0. That's right. While the rest of the world was fumbling around with Roman numerals and wondering why they couldn't calculate their way out of a paper bag, the Mayans had already figured out the power of nothingness. 0 wasn't just a placeholder, it was a concept, a symbol, a mathematical game-changer. Picture this. Around 36 BCE, while Julius Caesar was busy getting stabbed in the back, the Mayans were chilling in Mesoamerica, revolutionizing mathematics with a shell symbol representing 0. Now, you might be wondering, why does this matter? Well, dear listener, without 0, we wouldn't have the binary system that powers your smartphone, your laptop, or that smart fridge that keeps track of your grocery list. So, next time you ask Siri a question, give a little nod to those ancient Mayans who made it all possible. But let's zoom out a bit. The Mayan numerical system wasn't just about showing off their mathematical prowess. It had real-world applications that went beyond the cosmos and into the nitty-gritty of daily life. Forget the romantic notion of Mayans as stargazers obsessed with the end of the world. They were more concerned with the here and now. Their calculations helped them figure out when to plant crops, how to run a successful trade, and yes, even how to collect taxes. Because, in the end, nothing is certain but death and taxes, even in ancient Mesoamerica. And while we're busting myths, let's tackle the idea that the Mayans were all about mysticism. Sure, their temples and pyramids might scream ancient mystery, but their approach to math was anything but mystical. It was practical, efficient, and surprisingly modern. For instance, they used a simple dot and bar system for counting, a dot for 1, a bar for 5. It was like the precursor to the tally marks we use today when keeping score during a game night that gets a bit too competitive. In terms of practicality, the Mayans were all about using their math skills to manage resources and time. Their long count calendar wasn't just a fancy way to predict the apocalypse, it was a sophisticated system that allowed them to track long periods of time accurately, which was crucial for agricultural planning. Imagine trying to feed a growing population without knowing when the rainy season would hit. Spoiler alert, it wouldn't end well. So, while the Mayans might not have had smartphones or the internet, they were light years ahead when it came to mathematics. Their vigesimal system and the concept of zero laid the groundwork for future mathematical developments, proving that sometimes the most advanced technology is inspired by the simplest of ideas, like counting on your fingers and toes. And there you have it, a glimpse into the mathematical world of the Mayans. From 0 to base 20, they weren't just number crunchers, they were the original mathletes of the ancient world. So next time you're struggling with a math problem, just remember, if the Mayans could do it without the help of Google, so can you. So, with the Mayans setting the stage for a mathematical revolution, it's time to tackle their calendar systems, because these weren't just glorified wall calendars. Nope, these were state-of-the-art cosmic clocks, blending astronomy with a dash of day planning that would make even the most organized among us feel inadequate. Let's kick things off with the Hab, the Mayan equivalent of our solar calendar. This baby had 365 days, just like ours, but with a twist. Instead of months with quirky names like February or July, the Hab had 18 months, each with 20 days. And because the universe loves to keep us on our toes, they added a cheeky little 5-day month called Wayibs at the end. This was the Mayan version of anything goes, a time when the cosmic order took a brief holiday. Talk about embracing chaos. Unlike our modern calendars that keep things neat and tidy, the Hab reflected a worldview that acknowledged both order and disorder, a cosmic balance, if you will. Now, while the Hab was busy keeping track of earthly matters, the Tzolk'in was all about the spiritual and ceremonial side of life. This calendar had a 260-day cycle, a curious number that might seem random until you consider that it matches the human gestation period. Coincidence? Maybe. But it also reflects a deeply rooted connection with life itself. The Tzolk'in consisted of 20 periods of 13 days, each with its own deity and significance. Imagine trying to keep track of your dentist appointment when Mercury is in retrograde and your calendar is telling you it's the day of the Jaguar. It's a miracle they got anything done, but then again, maybe that's why they were so ahead in the mathematics game. They had a divine excuse for missing meetings. The pièce de résistance of the Mayan calendar systems was the long count. Forget your year-at-a-glance planner. This was a timeline that stretched across millennia. The long count calendar was designed to track longer periods of time with a precision that would make your wristwatch blush. Starting from a mythical creation date of August 11, 3114 BCE, the long count ticked away in a sequence of 30 94-year periods called baktuns. This wasn't just about knowing when to plant your corn, it was about understanding cosmic cycles, the rise and fall of civilizations, and perhaps a bit of existential dread about the passage of time. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the 2012 apocalypse hype. You remember it, back when everyone was stocking up on canned beans and building underground bunkers? The whole world seemed convinced that the Mayans had predicted the end of days. But in reality, it was just the end of a baktun, not the end of the world. Imagine throwing a New Year's Eve party and everyone thinks you're announcing the apocalypse. Awkward, right? The Mayans weren't doomsday prophets, they were simply resetting their cosmic odometer. In truth, this is where the myth and romance of the mysterious Mayans often overshadow their practical genius. Their calendars weren't about forecasting doom, but about marking time with an accuracy that was unprecedented. They were day planners on cosmic steroids, ensuring that the Mayans knew when to plant, harvest, and, yes, party. Without this meticulous planning, managing an empire with sprawling cities would have been a logistical nightmare. It's also worth noting that these calendars were more than just tools. They were part of the Mayans' identity, a testament to their understanding of the universe. They didn't just observe the stars, they wove them into the fabric of their society. Astronomy wasn't a hobby, it was the backbone of their civilization. The Mayans knew that the stars didn't control their fate, but they certainly influenced it, and they respected the celestial order with a diligence that modern astrologers might envy. So, next time you check your phone for the time, or flip your calendar to the next month, give a nod to the Mayans. They were the original timekeepers, the masters of cosmic scheduling. And while the world didn't end on December 21st, 2012, the real story is far more interesting. It's about a civilization that dared to chart the heavens, and in doing so, mapped out their own path through history. In the grand scheme of things, the Mayans remind us that while we might not be able to control time, we can certainly make the most of it. Their legacy isn't one of mysticism, but of practicality. A reminder that sometimes the greatest achievements come from simply knowing when to plant your corn and when to throw a party. Stay tuned, because the Mayans have more up their sleeves than just numbers and dates. Their civilization was a tapestry of intrigue, and we're just getting started. And speaking of things the Mayans had up their sleeves, let's pivot to something even more tangible than their celestial calendars, the awe-inspiring architecture that still dots the jungles and plains of Central America. We're about to take a deep dive into the world of Mayan temples and pyramids, where mathematics met stonework in a union that was as much about flexing intellectual muscle as it was about spiritual devotion. First things first, let's debunk a popular myth. These architectural marvels weren't just giant altars for sacrifices or oversized platforms for worshipping gods. Sure, religious rites played a role, but let's not pretend that was the whole story. The truth is, these structures were engineering masterpieces, designed with a precision that would make your average civil engineer blush. The Mayans were the original, anything you can do, I can do better. Mathematicians, using their knowledge not just to count beans or maize in this case, but to align their buildings with celestial events with breathtaking exactitude. Take El Castillo, the famous pyramid at Chichen Itza. It's not just a pretty face, it's a calendar in stone. This pyramid is aligned so that during the equinoxes the setting sun casts shadows that resemble a serpent slithering down the steps. That's right, folks. The Mayans built a giant snake out of shadows with nothing but math, stone, and a healthy dose of ambition. Now, if you're picturing ancient architects standing around with blueprints and protractors, you're not far off. They didn't just eyeball it, they calculated it. And they did it without the help of AutoCAD or laser levels. The Mayans' architectural prowess was a statement of power and intellect, a way to say, look what we can do with a little geometry and a lot of manpower. It was also a demonstration of their understanding of celestial mechanics. Their structures weren't just aligned with the sun. They were also oriented towards significant stars and planets. This wasn't mysticism, it was astronomy, applied science, if you will. The precision of these alignments would rival even the most meticulous modern-day astrologer. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to live in a city where the architecture itself doubled as a giant astronomical observatory? But why go to all this trouble? Well, in part, it was about control. By demonstrating mastery over the heavens, the ruling elite could reinforce their authority. It's hard to argue with someone who can predict an eclipse or make the sun's shadow perform a celestial striptease. The Mayans weren't just building monuments, they were building power structures, both literally and figuratively. By tying their architectural feats to celestial events, they could claim the favor of the gods, or at least the understanding of the cosmos, in a way that kept their subjects in awe. Now, let's talk numbers, because, in the world of the Mayans, numbers were everything. Their pyramids weren't just random piles of stone, they were carefully calculated constructions. For example, El Castillo's staircase consists of 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. Coincidence? Hardly. This was a deliberate design choice, a stone testament to their numerically sophisticated worldview. Each step was a day, each level a representation of a cosmic cycle, and each pyramid a mini-universe reflecting the greater cosmos. And while we're on the subject of pyramids, let's not forget about Tikal, one of the most famous Mayan cities. The Temple of the Great Jaguar stands as a testament to Mayan architectural and mathematical genius. Rising about 47 meters high, it's a reminder that the Mayans weren't just stacking stones, they were crafting structures with a purpose. The temple's orientation and dimensions were carefully chosen to align with the city's other major buildings, creating a harmonious architectural symphony that was both visually stunning and mathematically precise. But let's not get too starry-eyed. Building these architectural wonders required a workforce and resources that could stretch any civilization thin. The economic context of Mayan architecture is a story of power, politics, and the practical realities of sustaining an empire. Constructing a pyramid wasn't just about having the right equations. It was about having the right materials, the right workforce, and the right political climate. Stone blocks don't magically levitate into place after all. They needed to be quarried, transported, and meticulously arranged. A process that required both logistical savvy and a fair bit of muscle. So, while the Mayans were busy aligning their buildings with the stars, they were also managing the earthly concerns of labor and resource allocation. It's a testament to their organizational skills that they could pull off such feats without collapsing under the weight of their own ambitions. And let's not forget the social implications. The construction of these buildings provided employment and social cohesion, binding the community together in a shared enterprise that was as much about identity as it was about stone and mortar. In the end, Mayan architecture is a story of numbers and narratives, of heavenly alignments and earthly endeavors. It's a reminder that even in the ancient world, mathematics was more than an abstract concept. It was a tool for shaping the world, both literally and figuratively. And while the Mayans may have built their pyramids to align with the stars, they also built them to align with their own aspirations, proving once again that when it comes to human ingenuity, the sky is not the limit, it's just the beginning. As we wrap up this exploration of Mayan architecture, let's leave the doors open for what comes next. Because if you think their pyramids were impressive, wait until you hear about the cities they built around them, sprawling urban landscapes that were as much about community as they were about cosmic order. Stay tuned, because there's more to the Mayan world than meets the eye, and we're just getting started. Now, speaking of sprawling urban landscapes, let's dive into the bustling world of Mayan trade. Picture this: a network of city-states sprawled across the Yucatan Peninsula, each a hub of economic activity where trade routes were the lifelines that kept civilization thriving. Forget the romanticized notion of isolated jungle temples. The Mayans were master networkers long before LinkedIn was a thing. The Mayan economy was like a well-oiled machine, powered by a complex system of barter, mathematics, and a little something we like to call cacao. Ah yes, cacao beans, the unsung heroes of the Mesoamerican trade scene. Long before they were crushed into the chocolate bars we know today, cacao beans were as good as gold. These little seeds were more than just a tasty treat. They were currency, a medium of exchange that greased the wheels of Mayan commerce. Imagine living in a society where your morning cup of hot chocolate wasn't just a caffeine fix, but a status symbol. That's right, the Mayans knew the value of a good brew long before Starbucks put it in a paper cup. Cacao beans were so valuable that they were used to pay taxes, buy goods, and settle debts, a testament to their worth in the Mayan economic system. And here's a fun fact: it took about 100 cacao beans to buy a small rabbit. So, next time you're sipping your mocha latte, remember you're enjoying a drink with a currency pedigree. But the Mayan trade economy wasn't just about securing your next chocolate fix. It was a complex web of exchange that connected city-states across great distances. From the highlands of Guatemala to the lowlands of the Yucatan, goods and ideas flowed along trade routes that were as vital as any modern highway. Think obsidian from the volcanic regions, jade from the Motagua Valley, and feathers from tropical birds, each item a piece of the puzzle that kept the Mayan world turning. And this is where mathematics came into play. The Mayans weren't just trading goods, they were tracking them with a precision that would make modern accountants nod in approval. They used their numerical prowess to calculate trade values, manage inventories, and keep tabs on trade agreements. In a world without paper and spreadsheets, they relied on memory and stone inscriptions, an impressive feat considering the complexity of their trade networks. But let's not sugarcoat it. the Mayan trade system wasn't all sunshine and cacao. It was also a reflection of the socio-political dynamics that shaped their world. Trade routes were lifelines, but they were also battlegrounds. Control over these routes meant power, and power bred conflict. Rival city-states vied for dominance, and the spoils of trade often tipped the balance of power. This was a world where alliances were as fluid as the rivers that snaked through the landscape, and betrayal could be as bitter as unsweetened cacao. Now, here's the kicker. Despite all their achievements, the Mayans weren't immune to the pitfalls of economic complexity. Their reliance on trade made them vulnerable to disruptions, whether from environmental changes, resource depletion, or political upheaval. It's a story as old as civilization itself. The higher the stakes, the greater the fall. The collapse of trade networks often spelled disaster, and the Mayans learned this the hard way. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The story of Mayan trade is one of resilience and adaptability. They didn't just survive, they thrived, evolving their systems to meet the challenges of an ever-changing world. When one trade route closed, another opened. When resources ran thin, they innovated. It's a testament to their ingenuity that they managed to sustain complex economies without the conveniences of modern technology. As we peel back the layers of Mayan trade, it's clear that their economy was as much about social cohesion as it was about commerce. These trade networks weren't just economic arteries, they were cultural highways, facilitating the exchange of ideas, art, and technology. In a world where isolation was a death sentence, trade was the lifeblood that connected communities across the vast Mayan landscape. So, as we wrap up this whirlwind tour of Mayan trade, let's raise a ceremonial cacao cup to their legacy. They were the original traders, the pioneers of an economic model that emphasized exchange over isolation, community over competition. And while their civilization may have faded, their story is far from over. The Mayans remind us that even in a world of uncertainty, human ingenuity can carve a path through the chaos. As we look forward to what's next, remember, in the world of the Mayans, the only constant was change, and they embraced it with open arms and a handful of cacao beans. Stay tuned as we continue our journey through the Mayan world, exploring the intricate social structures and political dynamics that underpinned their civilization. Because if you think their trade networks were impressive, wait until you see how they managed to keep the peace, or at least attempted to. So, you've got this intricate web of Mayan trade, a society that's more connected than your Wi-Fi on a good day. But how exactly did they manage to keep this whole show on the road without letting it spiral into chaos? Into the Mayan social and political structures, a system as complex as the plot of a telenovela and just as engaging. The Mayans were masters of organization, and their society was built on a foundation of mathematics, astronomy, and a fair bit of political maneuvering. Let's start by peeling back the layers of Mayan society, where the king, or kuhul ajor, was the top banana. Forget the idea of a tyrant lounging around in a feathered headdress eating grapes. The Mayan kings were more like CEOs, balancing the books while keeping an eye on the competition. Their power wasn't absolute. It was earned through a blend of military strength, religious authority, and, you guessed it, mathematical savvy. They used their knowledge of celestial events to predict eclipses and align their reigns with cosmic cycles, effectively branding themselves as divinely favored leaders. But it wasn't just about the kings. The Mayan elite, including priests and scribes, formed the brain trust of this ancient society. These folks were the mathematicians, the astronomers, the keepers of knowledge that made Mayan civilization tick. They weren't hoarding knowledge in some ivory tower, either. They were out there, in the trenches, using their skills to address the practical challenges of governance. Whether that meant calculating the best time to harvest or negotiating trade deals with rival city-states. And speaking of trade, let's talk about the economic machine that drove Mayan society. Picture bustling markets filled with traders hawking everything from jade to jaguar pelts. The Mayans weren't just trading goods. They were exchanging ideas, technology, and culture. This was globalization before globalization was cool, a testament to the Mayans' ability to adapt and thrive in a diverse and interconnected world. But here's the kicker. The Mayans didn't just rely on trade to keep their civilization afloat. They had a robust agricultural system that was the envy of Mesoamerica. Through a combination of slash and burn agriculture, terracing, and irrigation, They managed to coax crops from even the most stubborn soils. This wasn't just luck, it was the result of careful observation and experimentation, a testament to their scientific inquiry and problem-solving prowess. Now, let's get to the juicy part, the myths and legends that have painted the Mayans as some kind of mysterious, mystical civilization. Sure, the idea of a lost culture shrouded in mystery is romantic, but let's not get carried away. The Mayans weren't magical, they were methodical. They didn't rely on prophecies or divine intervention to run their society. They relied on mathematics, astronomy, and a healthy dose of common sense. Take the infamous Mayan calendar, often touted as evidence of their mystical foresight. The reality is far more practical. The Mayans used their calendars not to predict doomsday scenarios, but to plan their agricultural and ceremonial schedules with precision. They understood the importance of timing, whether it was planting crops or appeasing the gods. And what about the idea of the Mayan collapse? Popular narratives love to paint it as a sudden catastrophic event, but the truth is more nuanced. The Mayan civilization didn't vanish overnight, it evolved, transformed by environmental changes, social upheaval, and shifting power dynamics. It's a reminder that civilizations are not static. They're living, breathing entities that adapt or perish. In the end, the legacy of the Mayans is not one of mystery, but of mastery. They were pioneers in mathematics and astronomy, innovators in agriculture and trade, and architects of social systems that balanced power with practicality. Their influence echoes through time, inspiring modern scholars and reminding us of the power of human ingenuity. So, the next time you marvel at the night sky or solve a tricky math problem, give a nod to the Mayans. They were the original problem solvers, the true scientists of the ancient world. Their story is a testament to the enduring power of knowledge and a reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries are those we can solve with a little bit of math and a lot of curiosity. As we wrap up this journey through the world of the Mayans, let's leave behind the myths and embrace the reality, a civilization that was as practical as it was profound, as grounded as it was grand. The Mayans remind us that in the quest for knowledge, the only limit is our own imagination, and maybe the occasional shortage of cacao beans. High in the heart-thumping altitudes of the Andes, where the air is thin enough to make even the most seasoned athlete wheeze, lies a landscape so dramatic it might as well have been designed by a set designer with a flair for the theatrical. This isn't just a place where mountains scrape the sky, it's a region teeming with a mosaic of cultures so diverse they make a kaleidoscope look like a black and white film. Forget the Incas for a second. Yes, you heard me right. We're putting those golden boys on pause, because the Andes are home to a bustling history of civilizations that are equally fascinating, if not more so. Let's start with the Chavan, a culture that flourished around 900 BCE to 200 BCE, long before the Incas were even a glint in history's eye. Imagine a society that's as much about psychedelics and jaguar worship as it is about agriculture and monumental architecture. Their ceremonial centre, Chavan de Huanta, nestled at a casual 3,200 metres above sea level, was basically the Coachella of the Andes, minus the Instagram influences. This was where folks gathered to get spiritually enlightened or just plain high with the help of the San Pedro cactus. Their art, full of snarling feline deities and serpentine motifs, suggests they were a society that didn't half-ass their expressions of power and spirituality. Now, let's zip south to the Nazca civilization, flourishing around 100 BCE to 800 CE. These folks are the ones responsible for the Nazca lines, those massive geoglyphs etched into the desert sands that have kept archaeologists scratching their heads for decades. Were they landing strips for ancient aliens? Probably not, but the idea does sound like an episode of Ancient Aliens that would get blockbuster ratings. In reality, these lines likely had something to do with water, an ever-precious commodity in the desert, serving as giant maps or ceremonial pathways in honor of deities who doled out the rain. But wait, there's more. The Moc, who occupied the northern coast of Peru from about 100 CE to 700 CE, were masters of pottery and irrigation. Picture this: intricately painted vases that detail everything from daily life to elaborate mythological tales, and even a few sex scenes that would make an HBO producer blush. These people knew how to tell a story without uttering a single word. Their advanced irrigation systems rivaled anything the Romans were doing across the pond, turning parched desert valleys into lush agricultural hubs. This was a society that understood the value of water like a millennial understands the value of a Wi-Fi connection. In the dizzying heights of the Andes, the practical realities were stark: shortness of breath, harsh climates, and the constant threat of natural disasters. But these cultures didn't just survive, they thrived. They didn't view the mountains as obstacles, but as allies, integrating them into their spiritual and practical lives. The Shavan, Nazca, and Moshe were not precursors to the Inca Empire. They were vibrant civilizations in their own right, each leaving behind a legacy as enduring as the mountains themselves. And while we're busting myths, let's address the elephant, or should I say, the llama in the room. The Incas weren't the first, nor the only, sophisticated society in the Andes. They were the latest in a long line of cultures that had been perfecting the art of high-altitude living for millennia. The Incas might have built Machu Picchu, but they were standing on the shoulders of giants, or perhaps more accurately, on the shoulders of jaguar worshippers and master potters. So next time someone waxes lyrical about the Inca Empire, remind them of the shaven shaman tripping on cactus juice, the Nazca artists etching colossal designs into the earth, and the Moshe potters crafting erotic ceramics. These are the real rock stars of the Andes, playing their own epic gigs long before the Incas took the stage. So, after you've dazzled your friends at the dinner table with tales of jaguar-worshipping Shavin, the Nazca's desert doodling, and the Moshe's risque ceramics, let's slide into something just as captivating: the vibrant economies and social structures of these ancient Andean cultures. Imagine a world where, instead of browsing Amazon for next-day delivery, you'd rely on llama caravans, the OG express service of the Andes. These woolly beasts were the unsung heroes, slogging through the treacherous mountain passes loaded with goods that would make any modern logistics company weep with envy. These ancient trade networks were nothing short of miraculous. They stretched from the icy peaks to the humid coastlines, connecting cultures like the Highland Shavan with coastal powerhouses like the Moshe. Picture this: a llama caravan winding its way down the mountains, laden with highland potatoes, quinoa, and the finest alpaca wool, bound for the coast. Once there, they'd load up on seafood, cotton, and those all-important spondylus shells, essential currency and symbols of wealth that were the Andean equivalent of Bitcoin. And let's not forget, these networks didn't just trade goods, they exchanged ideas, art, and even a little gossip from civilization to civilization. Now, speaking of economics, let's dive into the social hierarchies that propped up these ancient powerhouses. If you think navigating modern social strata is complicated, try wrapping your head around the layers of these societies. At the top, we had the elites, priests, warriors, and rulers who probably enjoyed the ancient version of avocado toast while peering down at the commoners. They were the keepers of knowledge, spirituality, and, of course, the keys to the storeroom. Beneath them, a middle class of artisans and traders kept the wheels of commerce turning, crafting those exquisite Moshe pots and Nazca textiles that still awe museum-goers today. But let's not sugarcoat things. Life for the average. Andean wasn't all sunlit terraces and spiritual awakenings. The majority toiled in fields, their backs bent under the relentless sun, mastering agricultural techniques that were centuries ahead of their time. They were the backbone of these societies, sustaining the entire social pyramid with their labor. These techniques, by the way, would make any modern-day sustainability guru green with envy. The Andeans were the original permaculture pioneers, utilizing terracing and advanced irrigation systems to grow crops in an unforgiving landscape. The Inca, for instance, later perfected these methods, but they didn't invent them. They were just smart enough to recognize a good thing when they saw it. And while we're on the subject of agriculture, it's worth noting that the Andean peoples cultivated over 3,000 varieties of potatoes. Yes, you heard me right, 3,000. That's more types of spuds than the average person has hot dinners in a lifetime. And then there was quinoa, that trendy superfood currently beloved by health nuts the world over, which has been a dietary staple in the Andes for thousands of years. They could grow it at altitudes that would make most plants pack their bags and head for sea level. But let's take a step back and admire the sheer audacity of these civilizations. They built empires in some of the most inhospitable terrains on Earth, places where modern folk might struggle to set up a campsite, let alone a thriving community. They didn't just survive, they thrived, turning adversity into advantage. And they did it all with technology that would make today's engineers shake their heads in disbelief. As we continue to unearth the tales of the Andes, remember that these societies weren't just precursors to the Incas. They were independent, innovative, and as complex as any modern civilization. The Chavin, Nazca, and Moshe may not have had the glittering allure of the Inca gold, but their legacies are woven into the very fabric of Andean culture. So, next time someone goes on about the Inca Trail, remind them of these remarkable civilizations who, without fanfare, laid the groundwork for one of history's greatest empires. These are the stories of the Andes, tales of trade, social intrigue, and agricultural genius, a narrative as rich and layered as the mountains themselves. The Andean tapestry of culture wasn't just a vibrant quilt of agriculture and art, it was a political chessboard where power players like the Wari and Tiwanaku maneuvered their pieces with a blend of shrewdness and folly. These societies were more than just footnotes to the Inca's grand narrative. They were the architects of a political landscape that would eventually cradle the Inca Empire itself. However, if you're imagining some kind of utopian highland harmony, well, let's just say you'd be as off base as a llama in a mosh pit. The Wari, flourishing between 600 and 1000 CE, were the first to strut their stuff in the highlands around modern-day Peru. Their capital, Huari, wasn't some quaint mountain village, it was a sprawling metropolis at over 2,600 meters above sea level, housing as many as 40,000 people. Impressive even by today's standards. Think of them as the Andean version of urban developers, laying down the blueprint for city planning that would make even the Romans stop and take notes. They built extensive road networks, not unlike the later Inca trails, and their architectural prowess included multi-story buildings and intricate irrigation systems. These were the folks who turned city building into an art form, and they did it all while gasping for air in the thin atmosphere. Now, let's pivot over to the Tiwanaku, their contemporaries to the south, straddling the border of modern-day Bolivia and Peru. They weren't just sitting around playing nice with the Warino, they were busy constructing their own monumental city, also called Tiwanaku, near the shores of Lake Titicaca. This was a place that could make even the staunchest city planner weep with joy. Imagine a ceremonial centre with grand sunken plazas, monolithic stone structures, and a population of around 20,000. This wasn't just a city, it was an ancient urban masterpiece. Both the Wari and Tiwanaku were not just slapping up walls and calling it a day. They engaged in a sort of Andean arms race of cultural and political influence, each trying to outshine the other with more impressive feats of engineering and statecraft. The Wari were known for their aggressive expansionist policies, employing a blend of military might and diplomacy to extend their influence across the Andes. They were the first to create a multi-ethnic empire in the region, a feat that sounds a bit like herding cats, given the diverse cultures and languages involved. Meanwhile, the Tiwanaku took a more laid-back approach, focusing on religious and trade networks. They were like the spiritual gurus of the Andes, spreading their influence through a mix of religious iconography and economic incentives. Their reach extended into the Atacama Desert and beyond, thanks to their mastery of llama caravans and control of key trade routes. But don't be fooled by their seemingly zen demeanor. They could flex their muscles when needed, maintaining a powerful army to protect their interests. Now, let's talk about the political blunders and coups that make Game of Thrones look like a family picnic. The Wari's penchant for rapid expansion eventually became their Achilles heel. Their empire was like a balloon that kept getting bigger until it inevitably popped. Internal strife, coupled with a series of severe droughts, led to their decline around 1000 CE. It turns out that building an empire on the backs of subject peoples isn't a sustainable model when the crops fail, and the charismatic leaders are nowhere to be found. The Tiwanaku, on the other hand, faced their own set of challenges. Their reliance on religious authority worked well until it didn't. With climate shifts and social unrest bubbling up in the 11th century, their centralized power structure crumbled. The once great city of Tiwanaku was abandoned, its grand plazas left to be reclaimed by the Andean wilds. It's a classic tale of putting too many eggs in the divine basket, only to find that the gods had left the building. These collapses weren't just the end of two civilizations. They were the beginning of a seismic shift in Andean politics. As the Wari and Tiwanaku faded into history, They left behind a power vacuum that would eventually be filled by the Incas, who deftly picked up the pieces and crafted an empire that would go down in the annals of history. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There are still a few more political twists and turns to navigate before we get to the Incas' grand entrance. The lessons here? In the high-stakes game of Andean politics, adaptability was key. The Wari and Tiwanaku showed the power and pitfalls of empire building in the mountains. They laid the groundwork for what was to come, proving that even in the dizzying heights of the Andes, political ambition knew no bounds. So, next time you hear someone waxing poetic about the harmonious societies of the ancient Andes, give them a knowing nod and remind them that behind every great empire lies a trail of unexpected coups, climatic shifts, and a whole lot of political chutzpah. As the dust settled on the political battlegrounds left by the Wari and Tiwanaku, the Andean highlands were ripe for a new power to rise. And boy, did the Incas seize that opportunity like a Black Friday shopper going for the last discount TV. Their expansion was as rapid and dazzling as a TikTok dance challenge going viral, sweeping through the Andean region in less than a century. By the time they were done, the Inca Empire stretched from modern-day Colombia all the way down to Chile, covering a whopping 2,500 miles. That's like driving from New York to Los Angeles, with a few detours to see the Grand Canyon, and doing it all on foot no less. Now, let's talk engineering marvels. If you think modern city planners are impressive, wait until you hear about the Incas. Machu Picchu, that Instagram darling perched high in the mountains, wasn't just a pretty face. It was a testament to Incan ingenuity, built in the mid-15th century, around 1450 CE, and abandoned just a century later. This architectural gem was hidden in the clouds, a sanctuary of stone that defied gravity and seemed to thumb its nose at the very laws of nature. Its construction showcased the Incas' mastery of stonework, where massive boulders were cut so precisely that not even a sheet of paper could fit between them. No mortar needed. It's like they were playing Tetris on the hardest level and winning. But Machu Picchu was just the tip of the iceberg. The Inca road network, known as the Chapak Ian, spanned over 25,000 miles, crisscrossing the empire with an efficiency that would make today's urban planners green with envy. These roads were the lifeblood of the empire, facilitating the rapid movement of armies, messengers, and trade goods. And let's not forget the Chaskis, the fleet-footed runners who relayed messages across these roads faster than a kid texting in class. Their relay system could cover up to 150 miles a day, ensuring the emperor in Cusco was never out of the loop. Speaking of Cusco, let's dive into the administrative prowess that made all this possible. The Incas ran their empire with a bureaucratic finesse that could give modern governments a run for their money. At its heart was the Ailu, the fundamental social unit that organized communities into collective labor forces. Every citizen contributed work to the state, a concept known as mita, which was as much about community service as it was about building monumental architecture. Imagine if your taxes were paid in sweat rather than dollars. That's mita for you. This system was so efficient that the Incas could mobilize massive workforces for public projects like the construction of temples, roads, and agricultural terraces. And while we're on the topic of agriculture, the Incas took farming to new heights, literally. They cultivated crops in terraces carved into the mountains, maximizing arable land in a place where flat ground was as rare as peace in a political debate. With these terraces, they grew staples like potatoes and maize, feeding a population of around 10 million people at their peak. That's a logistical feat that would make any modern supply chain manager break out in a cold sweat. Of course, the Incas also had a knack for marketing themselves as divine rulers, claiming descent from the sun god Inti. This divine lineage was a handy tool for consolidating power, though you'd be forgiven for rolling your eyes at the audacity of it all. It's like a CEO claiming they're the chosen one because their office has the best view. Yet, this belief helped maintain social order, as it tied the people's loyalty to a deity, not just a human ruler. But let's not sugarcoat the narrative with too much golden sunlit imagery. The Incas were as much about diplomacy as they were about domination. Their expansion strategy often involved offering local leaders a choice: join peacefully and enjoy the perks of Inca integration, or resist and face the full force of the Incan military machine. Spoiler alert, most chose the former. The Incas had no qualms about using their military might when necessary, and their army was nothing to sneeze at. They employed sophisticated tactics and had a logistical support system that kept their troops well fed and ready to rumble at a moment's notice. However, the myth of the Incas as benevolent rulers needs a bit of myth-busting. While it's true they provided infrastructure and stability, they also imposed their language, Quechua, and their gods on the conquered peoples. It was cultural assimilation with a side of coercion, ensuring that the Inca identity permeated every corner of the empire. It's like being forced to switch from your favorite local coffee shop to Starbucks overnight. Some perks, sure, but that unique local flavor gets a bit lost. Despite the grandeur and glory that comes with tales of their sprawling empire, the Incas, like any great power, had their share of internal strife and challenges. Succession disputes were as common as llama crossings in the Andes, and the death of a ruler could spark a civil war faster than you could say intestine-rattling elevation. As we delve deeper into the Incas' narrative, let's keep a keen eye on both the shimmering myths and the gritty realities. Their story is one of remarkable achievements and ambitious overreach, a tale of human innovation and the ever-present spectre of hubris. So, hang tight, because the Inca saga is far from over, and we've got plenty more ground to cover before we wrap up this Andean adventure. Stay tuned for the next installment, where we'll really dig into how this empire, built on such solid foundations, eventually found itself teetering on the edge of collapse. As we teeter on the edge of the Inca Empire's story, let's introduce a plot twist worthy of a Netflix drama, the arrival of the Spanish. If you think your last vacation was a whirlwind, imagine sailing across the Atlantic only to stumble upon an empire that's as vast as it is unsuspecting. In 1532, a group of about 168 Spanish conquistadors, led by Francisco Pizarro, set foot in a land teeming with gold and opportunity. This ragtag band wasn't just any group of explorers. They were the epitome of audacity, armed with steel, gunpowder, and a hefty dose of European hubris. Now, the Incas, despite their legendary roads and administrative prowess, were caught in a civil war between two brothers vying for the throne, Atahualpa and Huascar. Talk about bad timing. It's like having a family feud just as the neighbors decide to drop by. The Spaniards, ever the opportunists, saw this internal strife as an opening. They captured Atahualpa in a move that would make any Machiavellian strategist proud, or perhaps horrified. Offering a ransom that would make even the greediest pirate blush, Atahualpa promised rooms filled with gold and silver. But even after the Incas delivered, filling a room with around 24 tons of precious metal, the Spaniards executed him anyway. Talk about a double cross for the ages, a betrayal that could sour even the sweetest of deals. This wasn't just a clash of swords and strategy, it was a collision of worlds, of ideologies and diseases. Smallpox, a deadly passenger on the European ships, swept through the Andean highlands with a lethality that outpaced the conquistadors' horses. It decimated the Inca population in ways that battles never could, killing millions and weakening resistance before it even began. It's the grim irony of history that sometimes the deadliest weapons aren't forged in fire, but carried in coughs and sneezes. But let's pause for a moment to consider the sheer audacity of the Spanish conquest. Armed with little more than a sense of destiny and a handful of firearms, they dismantled an empire that took centuries to build. It's a stark reminder that history often hinges on chance encounters and bold moves, not just grand designs. The Spanish, with their relentless drive for riches and their unyielding belief in divine favor, reshaped the Andes in their image. They imposed their language, their religion, and their systems of governance with an efficiency that would make any corporate takeover look like child's play. The fall of the Inca Empire was swift and brutal, a testament to the fragile balance between power and chaos. Yet, in the ashes of this collapse, a new Andean world began to emerge, one that was a tangled weave of Spanish colonial ambitions and resilient indigenous traditions. The Spanish introduced the encomienda system, a sort of feudal arrangement that forced native populations into labor under Spanish landowners. It was exploitation dressed up as economic reform, a system that promised protection and Christianization but delivered little more than oppression. However, the Andes were not so easily subdued. Indigenous resistance simmered beneath the surface, erupting in periodic revolts and uprisings like the Great Rebellion led by Tupac Amaru II in 1780. Though ultimately unsuccessful, these uprisings were a testament to the enduring spirit and resilience of Andean cultures. They refused to be mere footnotes in their own story, constantly pushing back against the colonial narrative imposed upon them. As the centuries rolled on, the Andes became a melting pot of cultures and influences, a tapestry woven with threads of Spanish conquest and indigenous resilience. The legacy of these ancient civilizations, from the Chavin to the Incas, continued to shape the region's identity. Their agricultural innovations, such as terrace farming and crop diversity, persisted, feeding populations and informing sustainable practices even today. The languages, art, and traditions of these cultures endured, a testament to their adaptability and strength. The Spanish brought horses, wheat, and a world of European customs, but they also inadvertently preserved the essence of Andean ingenuity. The blending of these worlds, though fraught with violence and coercion, also gave rise to a unique cultural synthesis. Today, the rich tapestry of Andean culture is a living legacy, visible in the vibrant festivals, the intricate weavings, and the colourful marketplaces that pepper the highlands. Reflecting on this history, one can't help but appreciate the tenacity of human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. The Andes, with their lofty peaks and deep valleys, continue to be a symbol of resilience, a reminder that while empires may rise and fall, the cultural heart of a people can endure. It's a narrative that invites us to ponder our own stories, to consider the legacies we build and the histories we inherit. So, as you lay down with these tales dancing in your mind, remember that the Andes are more than just a backdrop to history. They are a testament to human ingenuity and endurance, a reminder that while the winds of change may blow fiercely, the roots of culture run deep and strong. Whether you find yourself in the shadow of Machu Picchu or the bustling streets of Cusco, you're not just walking through history, you're part of a story that's still being written. And isn't that a legacy worth pondering? In the bustling intellectual bazaar of ancient India, imagine philosophers not as the serene, cross-legged sages of popular lore, but more like a motley crew of academic gladiators, each convinced their particular flavour of wisdom was the secret source of existence. Picture them in togas, if togas were a thing in India, engaged not in physical combat, but in epic verbal jousts. We're talking about the 6 orthodox schools of Indian philosophy: Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. Each one was like a philosophical start-up, vying for the title of Ultimate Truth Inc. Let's start with Nyaya, the ancient equivalent of the kid who always aces debates. These folks were the original logic nerds, and trust me, they had a point. Or, more accurately, they had a lot of syllogisms. Founded by Gautama, not to be confused with the Buddha, Nyaya focused on logic and epistemology. They weren't satisfied with just claiming to know stuff. No, they wanted to know how they knew stuff. Born around the 2nd century BCE, Nyaya was the philosophical Sherlock Holmes of the bunch, insisting on evidence and inference like a detective on a case. If Nyaya philosophers existed today, they'd be the ones demanding hard data at every meeting, probably annoying everyone else in the process. Next, we have Vaisheshika, the metaphysical counterpart to Nyaya. Think of them as the universe's obsessive-compulsive organizers, categorizing reality into neat little boxes called padarthas. They'd make Marie Kondo proud. Founded by Kannada, not to be confused with Canada, though both are vast and complex, Vaisheshika dealt with the nature of reality through atomism. These atoms, they proposed, were eternal and indestructible, a kind of cosmic Lego set that made up everything. The school was born around the same time as Nyaya, and together they formed a logical power couple, like peanut butter and jelly, but less edible. Meanwhile, Samkhya was the philosophical minimalist, stripping down existence to its bare essentials, Purusha consciousness, and Prakriti matter. Founded by Kapila somewhere around 700 BCE, Samkhya's dualism was like a spiritual yin and yang, but with less emphasis on harmony and more on the stark division of labour. Consciousness was the observer, matter was everything else. If Samkhya had a theme song, it'd probably be Eye of the Tiger, a relentless pursuit of understanding the interplay between mind and matter. They were the original mind-body splitters, long before Descartes made it cool. Then there's yoga, Samkhar's more practical sibling? If Samkhar is the theory, yoga is the lab work. Patanjali, writing the Yoga Sutras around the 2nd century BCE, took the Purusha Prakriti framework and turned it into a manual for spiritual liberation. Forget your Instagram yogis with their expensive mats and designer leggings. This was hardcore stuff. The goal was moksha, or liberation, through the disciplined practice of meditation and self-restraint. Think less downward dog and more upward enlightenment. Yoga was like the P90X of ancient spiritual practices, promising transformation through discipline and effort. Mimamsa, on the other hand, was the school for those who loved a good ritual. Founded by Jaimini around the 3rd century BCE, it focused on the power of Vedic rituals to sustain the cosmic order. Mimamsa took the Vedas very seriously, in a way that would put even the most devout Harry Potter fan to shame. For them, the rituals were not just symbolic acts, but necessary actions to maintain the universe's balance. They were like the ancient world's quality assurance team, ensuring everything ran smoothly through precise and meticulous practices. And finally, we arrive at Vedanta, the philosophical rock star of the Indian tradition. Vedanta was like the cool kid in school, founded by Badarayana around 200 BCE, and it quickly became the dominant philosophical force. Shankara, arguably its most famous proponent, would come along in the 8th century CE to give it a major reboot. His non-dualistic Advaita Vedanta argued that the ultimate reality was a single, unified consciousness. Brahman and everything else was just an illusion. Shankara's arguments were so compelling that he could probably talk his way out of a parking ticket if given the chance. His debates were legendary, often leaving his opponents with existential hangovers. As these schools battled it out in the intellectual arenas of ancient India, they were like the original TED Talkers, each with their own unique spin on the big questions. What's the nature of reality? How do we know what we know? What's the meaning of life? They didn't have PowerPoint slides, but they had sutras, succinct aphorisms packed with enough intellectual punch to fuel centuries of debate. Now, you might be wondering why these schools mattered. Well, they didn't just shape the way people thought about philosophy, they influenced everything from art to politics to spirituality. Imagine if today's tech companies were also responsible for your spiritual well-being and political systems. That's the kind of influence these schools wielded. They were the ancient world's thought leaders, shaping not just individual lives, but entire civilizations. And while they each claimed to have cracked the cosmic code, the truth is, their disagreements and debates enrich the tapestry of human thought, leaving us with a legacy as complex and vibrant as a Bollywood dance number. So, as we delve deeper into this philosophical landscape, keep in mind that these schools were not just about abstract thought. They were about the practical application of wisdom in a world that was as chaotic and unpredictable as our own. And while they may have disagreed on the details, they all shared a common goal to make sense of the universe and our place within it. In that sense, they're not so different from us today. After all, who among us hasn't tried to find meaning in the chaos of existence, armed with nothing but a few theories and a lot of questions? Now, speaking of making sense of the universe, let's dive into the world of ancient India's philosophical rebels, the heterodox schools. These were the mavericks, the ones who looked at the orthodox schools with their Vedic rituals and cosmic order and said, "Nah, we're good, thanks." First up on our list of intellectual insurgents is Buddhism, founded by none other than Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha himself, who apparently got tired of his princely lifestyle and decided enlightenment was more appealing than silk sheets and gourmet feasts. Buddhism, born in the 5th century BCE, was like the punk rock of ancient philosophies, questioning not just authority, but the very nature of existence. Siddhartha's big revelation under the Bodhi tree was the Four Noble Truths, which, in layman's terms, boil down to life sucks because we want stuff, so maybe wanting less would make life suck less. And then there's the Eightfold Path, which is basically a life hack to nirvana, not the grunge band, but a state of blissful nothingness. Think of it as the ultimate do not disturb setting for your soul. Now, you might wonder, how did this ascetic lifestyle play out economically? Well, Buddhist monks were the original minimalist influencers, living on alms and shunning material possessions. Picture a monk with a begging bowl, the ancient equivalent of a GoFundMe page, relying on the generosity of others to get by. It was a pretty sweet deal. No mortgage, no 9 to 5, just a lot of meditation and the occasional sermon. But let's not romanticize too much. Living off charity wasn't exactly a cakewalk. It required a level of detachment from worldly desires that makes Marie Kondo look like a hoarder. Then there's Jainism, another heavyweight in the heterodox ring, founded by Mahavira around the same time as Buddhism. If Buddhism was punk rock, Jainism was more hardcore metal, with its extreme emphasis on non-violence and asceticism. Mahavira took the concept of live and let live to a whole new level, advocating for ahimsa, or non-violence, in every aspect of life. We're talking about monks sweeping the ground in front of them to avoid stepping on insects, a commitment that makes veganism look like a dietary fad. Economically, Jain monks took austerity to the next level. They owned nothing, not even clothes in some cases, which led to the practice of sky-clad asceticism. Yes, that means exactly what you think. Talk about cutting costs. But here's the kicker. Jainism wasn't just about extreme asceticism. It also laid the groundwork for a community that would become incredibly influential in trade and commerce. Jains, adhering to strict ethical guidelines, became trusted merchants, proving that you don't need to own much to wield economic power. Finally, we have the Kavakas, the philosophical equivalent of that one college friend who never quite outgrew their rebellious phase. Emerging around the 6th century BCE, the Kavaka school was all about materialism. Their motto? Enjoy life while you can. They questioned everything, especially the afterlife, which they dismissed as a fairy tale for the gullible. For the Kavakas, sensory experience was king, and the idea of an eternal soul was about as appealing as a soggy sandwich. These folks weren't exactly the darlings of the philosophical community, often derided by their contemporaries for being hedonistic. But let's give them credit for their audacity. They dared to question the very fabric of spiritual thought, arguing that material well-being was the only reality worth pursuing. Economically, the Kavaka approach was straightforward: make money, enjoy it, and don't worry about what happens after you kick the bucket. It's a philosophy that wouldn't be out of place in today's consumer-driven society. So, what did these schools mean for ancient India? In a world dominated by Vedic rituals and cosmic hierarchies, the heterodox schools were a breath of fresh air or a storm, depending on who you ask. They challenged the status quo, offering alternative paths to wisdom and happiness. They also brought about significant social change, questioning caste systems and promoting more egalitarian ideals. While Buddhism and Jainism preached detachment from material wealth, they ironically played a crucial role in the economic fabric of the society, influencing trade practices and ethical business conduct. The heterodox schools were like intellectual disruptors, shaking up the philosophical landscape with ideas that were as radical as they were diverse. They forced people to rethink what it meant to be human, what it meant to live a good life, and what exactly we should be aiming for in this chaotic existence. And while they didn't have all the answers, who does, really? They certainly left a mark, shaping the spiritual and philosophical discourse for centuries to come. As we continue our exploration of these ancient philosophical playgrounds, it's clear that these schools weren't just about abstract ideas. They were about challenging norms, questioning authority, and finding new ways to understand the world. In that sense, they're not so different from the rebellious thinkers of any era, always pushing the boundaries of what's accepted, always seeking a deeper truth. So, let's keep this journey going, because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the quest for knowledge is never truly over. Now, let's dive into the real meat of the story, how these ancient philosophies didn't just float in the ether like so many abstract clouds, but actually landed with a thud on the ground of practical politics and society. And when it comes to blending the spiritual with the political, Ashoka the Great is your go-to guy. Imagine a ruler who decided, after a particularly nasty battle, that maybe all this bloodshed wasn't exactly the best way to run a kingdom. Cue the light bulb moment. Ashoka embraces Buddhism not just as a personal philosophy, but as a state-endorsed program. Think of it as the original government-sponsored mindfulness initiative, only with less yoga mats and more edicts on stone pillars. Ashoka, who reigned from 268 to 232 BCE, was the third emperor of the Maurya dynasty. Before his spiritual epiphany, he was busy expanding his empire through, let's say, less than gentle means. But after the bloody Kalinga War in 261 BCE, where over 100,000 people are said to have perished, Ashoka had a change of heart, quite literally, a battlefield conversion. It's the kind of turnaround that makes Ebenezer Scrooge look like a procrastinator. One minute, he's the ferocious lion of battle. The next, he's the poster child for non-violence. If Ashoka were around today, he'd probably have a viral TED Talk titled, "How I Learned to Stop Warring and Love the Dharma." But let's not kid ourselves. Transforming Buddhism from a monastic movement into a state ideology wasn't all lotus flowers and peaceful meditations. Ashoka had to deal with the nitty-gritty realities of governing a massive empire. We're talking about managing a bureaucracy that spread over 2 million square miles, from Afghanistan to Bangladesh. That's a lot of ground to cover, especially when your new mantra is all about peace and compassion. Imagine trying to sell non-violence to a bunch of war-hardened generals. It's like trying to convince a shark that tofu is tastier than seals. So, how did Ashoka pull this off? For starters, he appointed Dharma Mahamatras, essentially the ancient equivalent of wellness coaches, to promote moral and ethical living among his subjects. These officials were tasked with spreading Buddhist teachings and encouraging practices like honesty, non-violence, and tolerance. If there were ancient HR departments, these guys would be the ones sending out memos about the importance of work-life balance and monthly meditation sessions. Moreover, Ashoka wasn't shy about using a bit of old-school marketing. He had his edicts carved into rocks and pillars throughout his empire, making sure everyone from the highest noble to the lowliest peasant got the memo. These inscriptions, over 30 of which still survive today, were the ancient world's version of viral tweets, short, impactful, and designed to reach the masses. They covered everything from animal rights — he was big on banning animal sacrifices — to encouraging vegetarianism and religious tolerance. Talk about a comprehensive policy agenda. However, Ashoka's transition wasn't without its complications. For one, the logistics of maintaining a massive empire while promoting non-violence is a bit like juggling flaming swords while trying to knit a sweater. Ashoka had to balance his idealism with the practicalities of governance. It's one thing to preach peace. It's another to keep the empire running smoothly when your neighbours are eyeing your territories like buffet items. His administration still had to maintain a standing army because, let's face it, not everyone was on board with the whole peace and love thing. There's also the matter of economics. While Ashoka promoted Buddhism, he didn't exactly turn his back on capitalism. The Mauryan Empire thrived on trade, with bustling markets connecting regions through a network of roads and waterways. This was an age where silk, spices, and precious gems flowed through the empire, greasing the wheels of commerce. It's safe to say that Ashoka was no stranger to the economic game, and while he might have been meditating on the impermanence of wealth, he certainly didn't let the empire's coffers run dry. What Ashoka did brilliantly was integrate Buddhist principles into the governance of his empire without dismantling its economic and military foundations. He was like a master chef, blending the spiritual and the practical into a dish that was palatable to both monks and merchants. This balancing act allowed Buddhism to flourish without sidelining the very real needs of a sprawling, diverse population. The irony, of course, is that while Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism helped to spread its teachings across Asia, it also marked the beginning of Buddhism's transformation into a more worldly institution. As Buddhist monastic communities grew with state support, they accumulated wealth and influence, sometimes becoming as political as they were spiritual. So much for renouncing worldly attachments, eh? In a way, Ashoka's reign exemplifies the eternal struggle between idealism and pragmatism in politics. It's a tale as old as time. How do you implement lofty ideals in a world that often seems allergic to them? How do you sell peace in a marketplace that thrives on power and competition? Ashoka's solution was to make Buddhism a unifying force, a common ground where his subjects, regardless of their backgrounds, could meet. But let's not forget, Ashoka the Great was still an emperor. His legacy is a testament to the fact that even the most enlightened rulers have to play the political game. His story is a reminder that the path of Dharma, while noble, is fraught with complexity and contradiction. Yet, it's these very contradictions that make history so endlessly fascinating. Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism was not just a personal journey, it was a seismic shift in the cultural and political landscape of ancient India, one that would ripple through time, influencing countless generations. As we continue to explore the intersection of philosophy and power, remember that the story of Ashoka and his spiritual empire is far from over. In the next part, we'll delve into how these ideas continued to evolve and shape the world long after Ashoka's reign. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that the quest for wisdom, much like the pursuit of power, is a never-ending journey. So, stay tuned as we unravel more tales from the philosophical tapestry of ancient India. As we delve deeper into the ripple effects of Ashoka's reign and its philosophical legacy, let's pivot our gaze to the great cultural crossroads that was the Silk Road. This wasn't just any ancient trade route. It was the internet of antiquity, a bustling highway of ideas where Indian philosophy rubbed shoulders with Greek logic and Persian metaphysics. Picture a cosmic cocktail party where Socrates, Zoroaster, and the sages of India exchanged intellectual hors d'oeuvres. If ideas were currency, the Silk Road was the Wall Street of Enlightenment. Now, let's set the stage. We're talking about a network of trade routes that spanned over 4,000 miles at its peak, connecting China to the Mediterranean. But we're not just dealing with silk and spices, folks. This was a superhighway for thoughts, beliefs, and philosophies that traveled alongside the goods. Imagine scrolls of Sanskrit texts making their way to the libraries of Alexandria, while Greek treatises found their way to the ashrams of India. It's like the viral cat meme of the ancient world, except the cats were philosophical concepts and the memes were, well, a bit more profound. One might wonder, what did these philosophical exchanges actually look like? Well, take the Greeks, for instance. They were fascinated by Indian thought, particularly the logical rigor of Nyaya and the metaphysical musings of Samkhya. Greek philosophers like Pyrrho, said to have travelled to India with Alexander the Great around 326 BCE, returned home profoundly influenced by Indian ascetic practices. Pyrrho's skepticism, which later became a cornerstone of Greek philosophy, was likely seasoned with a dash of Indian spice. Imagine a philosophical fusion dish where Socratic questioning married Indian introspection, a match made in metaphysical heaven. But it wasn't just a one-way street. Indian philosophers were equally intrigued by Greek ideas. The concept of atomism, for example, found in both Greek and Indian traditions, suggests a shared intellectual curiosity. It's like discovering that your favorite indie band from two separate continents were secretly collaborating all along. The Indian Vaisheshika school's atomism had uncanny resemblances to the Greek philosophy of Democritus, who proposed that everything is composed of indivisible particles. These intellectual parallels were not mere coincidences, but likely the result of vibrant exchanges along the Silk Road. And then there's Persia, the ancient world's own philosophical melting pot. Zoroastrianism, with its dualistic vision of good versus evil, found a receptive audience in India. It's not hard to see the appeal. The stark moral clarity of Zoroastrianism resonated with the dualistic frameworks of Samkhya and the ethical teachings of Buddhism and Jainism. This was more than just a philosophical flirtation. It was an intellectual alliance that enriched both traditions. Picture a philosophical Venn diagram where Indian and Persian circles overlap in a shared quest for cosmic order. But let's not sugarcoat it. This cultural exchange wasn't all kumbaya and intellectual harmony. Misunderstandings and reinterpretations were as common as the dust on the caravan trails. Consider the Greek accounts of Indian gymnosophists, or naked philosophers. While the Greeks romanticized these ascetics as wise sages, they often missed the nuanced spiritual motivations behind their austerity. It's a classic case of the exotic other being both admired and misunderstood. An age-old tale that still resonates in today's cross-cultural interactions. Economically, the Silk Road was a boon for any philosophy with a good travel agent. Monasteries and philosophical schools became intellectual pit stops for merchants who funded their journeys with donations. This symbiotic relationship was as financially savvy as it was spiritually enriching. Think of it as a Patreon for ancient thinkers, where trade winds carried not just goods but also the currency of ideas. And what an economy it was. Estimates suggest that by the 1st century CE, the trade in silk alone was worth its weight in gold, literally. Of course, along with the spread of ideas came the inevitable commercialization of philosophy. As these schools gained traction, some began to resemble the very institutions they once critiqued. Monasteries amassed wealth, and philosophical debates occasionally devolved into intellectual turf wars. Picture a philosophical version of a rock band that started with pure artistic vision, but eventually succumbed to the lure of record deals and merchandise sales. So, why does all this matter? Well, the cultural exchange along the Silk Road did more than just enrich individual traditions. It laid the groundwork for a global philosophical dialogue. It challenged insular thinking and provoked new questions about the nature of existence, ethics, and the cosmos. The Greeks, Persians, and Indians weren't just swapping stories, they were building a foundation for future intellectual revolutions. It's a legacy that reminds us that no civilization exists in a vacuum, a truth as relevant today as it was when camel caravans plied the ancient trade routes. As we continue to unravel this tapestry of cross-cultural ideas, remember that the Silk Road was not just a path of commerce, but a bridge of thought. It was a conduit through which the human quest for knowledge found new pathways, new questions, and new answers. And as we journey further into the philosophical exchanges of the ancient world, let's keep in mind that the pursuit of wisdom is a road that never truly ends. So stay tuned as we explore more tales from this vibrant crossroads of ancient thought, where the past continues to whisper its secrets to those willing to listen. As we journey further into the philosophical exchanges of the ancient world, the Silk Road reminds us that ideas are the ultimate travelers, crossing boundaries and transcending cultures, just like overpacked tourists with oversized maps. But what about the legacies these ancient schools left behind? How do their ideas echo in today's world, where enlightenment might just be a vintage trend like bell-bottom jeans or disco? Fast forward to modern times, and you'll see that the echoes of these ancient philosophies are everywhere, even if they're sometimes as subtle as a whisper in a crowded bazaar. Take Nyaya, the logic geeks of ancient India. Their insistence on evidence and inference laid the groundwork for rational inquiry, influencing everything from scientific methods to the way we argue on the internet today. Ever had a Twitter debate about the merits of pineapple on pizza? Thank Nyaya for teaching us that structured argumentation is a thing, even if it sometimes devolves into a shouting match in all caps. The Vaisheshika school, with its cosmic Lego set of atoms, can be seen as a precursor to modern physics. Their atomistic theories, while not entirely accurate by today's standards, nudged humanity toward the idea that the universe is built from tiny, invisible building blocks. It's a concept that eventually paved the way for quantum mechanics, proving that even ancient philosophical musings can have explosive or implosive consequences. Then we have the Samkhya and Yoga schools, whose influence on modern wellness culture is as pervasive as a kale smoothie in a health-conscious neighborhood. While Samkhya's dualism may have gotten lost in translation, Yoga's practical approach to achieving spiritual and mental balance has found a global audience. But let's not kid ourselves. Today's yoga studios, with their ambient lighting and soothing playlists, are a far cry from the ascetic practices of Patanjali's era. If Patanjali were to time travel to a modern yoga class, he might wonder why enlightenment now requires a subscription and a 6-month waiting list. Mimamsa and its ritual-heavy philosophy might seem like a relic of the past, but their emphasis on action over belief resonates in today's world where the mantra, "just do it," has taken on a life of its own. Whether it's rituals or routines, the idea that actions shape reality is ingrained in the modern psyche, from morning routines to productivity hacks. It's like ancient wisdom got a motivational speaker makeover. Vedanta's non-dualistic philosophy, championed by Shankara, has had a profound impact on modern spiritual thought. Its idea that all is one and one is all resonates with New Age movements and even finds echoes in quantum theory's notion of interconnectedness. However, the romantic appeal of oneness often overlooks the practical challenges of living in a world where division and duality are as constant as change itself. On the flip side, the heterodox schools like Buddhism and Jainism have influenced everything from mindfulness movements to ethical business practices. Buddhism's Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path have become staples in Western self-help books, often stripped of their cultural context and repackaged as quick-fix solutions. Meanwhile, Jainism's emphasis on non-violence has inspired movements for animal rights and environmentalism, proving that ancient asceticism can still offer a relevant moral compass. And let's not forget the Carvakas, who would probably feel right at home in today's consumer-driven society. Their unapologetic materialism and skepticism about the afterlife resonate in a world where YOLO, you only live once, is a lifestyle, and existential dread is just an inconvenient dinner guest. The Carvakas might have been the philosophical outcasts of their time, but their belief in living for the now is a sentiment that's found new life in modern culture. But what would these ancient thinkers make of today's world, where enlightenment is often marketed as a lifestyle accessory? Would they see our quest for knowledge as noble or just noise? Would they be impressed by our technological advancements or baffled by our existential angst? The truth is, while the medium has changed, the message remains surprisingly consistent. We're all just trying to make sense of a world that often doesn't make sense. In the grand tapestry of human history, these ancient schools of thought are like threads that weave through time, connecting past and present in a rich, complex pattern. They remind us that the quest for understanding is as timeless as the stars, even if our modern interpretations sometimes turn profound teachings into punchlines. Yet, within the humour lies a deeper truth. The pursuit of wisdom is a journey without a final destination, a road that never ends as long as there are questions to ask and mysteries to explore. As we wrap up this exploration of ancient Indian philosophy, it's clear that these schools were more than just intellectual exercises. They were vibrant, living traditions that sought to illuminate the mysteries of existence. They remind us that while times have changed, the fundamental questions remain the same. Who are we? Where are we going? And what the heck are we doing here? These questions continue to fuel the human spirit, urging us to seek, explore, and challenge the boundaries of what we know. So, as you drift off into the realm of dreams, ponder this. The legacy of these ancient philosophers isn't just in the ideas they left behind, but in the very act of questioning itself. It's a reminder that the quest for enlightenment, whether in a cave, a library, or the glow of a smartphone screen, is a pursuit as old as humanity itself. And who knows, maybe one day we'll find the answers we seek. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, the journey is the destination. Your day begins not with the crowing of a rooster, but with the soft rustle of feathers. Welcome to 12th century France, where your job is more about winged warriors than ploughs and pitchforks. As the local falconer, you're the medieval equivalent of a sports coach, but instead of athletes, you've got birds of prey. And let me tell you, these birds are the real celebrities. First up, let's talk about your prized possessions, the falcons. These aren't your average backyard pigeons. A good falcon could cost you up to a small fortune, about 1,000 pence, which, in today's money, is like buying a high-end sports car. The price tag reflects not just their hunting prowess, but also their status symbol among the elites. But here's the kicker. Falconry wasn't just for the nobility. Sure, kings and dukes loved to flaunt their birds, but everyone from knights to merchants got in on the action. It was a medieval pastime that practically anyone with a bit of coin and a love for the hunt could enjoy. So, your morning begins with preparing these feathered divas for the day. You start by feeding them not just any scraps, but carefully selected morsels. We're talking about raw meat, sometimes even small game, because nothing says, "I love you," like a breakfast of champions. Then comes the grooming. You check their feathers, ensuring they're in prime condition. Remember, a falcon with shabby feathers is like a knight with a rusty sword, useless and embarrassing. Next, you gear up with the essentials. You've got hoods, jesses, and leashes, all crafted from the finest materials you can afford. Leather is a popular choice, durable yet flexible. The hood, a tiny leather cap, helps keep your falcon calm until it's time to hunt. And let's not forget the bells attached to their legs, a medieval GPS system that alerts you to their location. The economics of falconry extend beyond just owning a bird. Maintaining it requires continuous investment in quality gear. Falconry is more than just a hobby, it's an economic enterprise. In medieval France, it was a way to supplement your diet with fresh game. The birds hunted rabbits, pheasants, and other small creatures, providing food for your table, and sometimes, if the catch was good, a little extra for the market. This isn't just about sport, it's survival with a flair. But let's bust a myth while we're here. The romantic image of falconry as a pastime for the lounging elite, not entirely accurate. Sure, the lords and ladies loved to show off their falcons, but for many it was practical. Falcons helped control pests and provided much-needed protein. Plus, there's something undeniably cool about sending a bird skyward and watching it swoop down with precision and grace. Your morning isn't just about the birds, though. It's a social affair. As you tend to your falcons, others in the village might stop by for a chat or to admire your birds. Falconry has a communal aspect, a shared passion that transcends social classes. It's a day where people gather, exchange tips, and occasionally engage in friendly competitions to see whose bird can catch the fastest prey. Your role as a falconer is not just a job, it's a blend of art and science. You understand the temperament of each bird, know when they're ready to hunt, and how to train them to return. This isn't just flying blind, it requires skill, patience, and a touch of medieval magic. It's almost like you're whispering secrets to these winged predators. As you wrap up the morning preparations, you can't help but appreciate the blend of tradition and innovation that defines your craft. Falconry has been around for centuries, with roots stretching back to ancient Mesopotamia. But here, in your little corner of France, it's both an art form and a livelihood. The day is just beginning, and with your falcons ready, you're set to take on whatever the medieval world throws at you. And so, with your trusty falcons prepped and primed for action, you step into a world where feathers aren't just for the birds, but for weaving the complex tapestry of medieval society. As the sun climbs higher, shedding light on the rolling French countryside, let's dive into the political and social significance of these winged wonders. Now, you might think falconry was just about catching your lunch, but oh boy, was it ever more than that. Picture this, you're a noble trying to impress a potential ally, or, let's be honest, a potential spouse. What's your move? Why, you show them your bird, of course. A well-trained falcon was the medieval equivalent of swiping right, impressing not just with its prowess, but with the prestige it represented. In the high-stakes game of courtship and diplomacy, falcons were the ultimate wingman. Literally. The ability to gift a rare bird could seal alliances, smooth over disputes, or woo a lady fair. Imagine a young knight presenting a peregrine falcon, worth a cool 1,000 pence to his lady as a token of his affection. It's like gifting a diamond ring, but with more feathers and fewer carats. And who could resist the charm of a man who can command such a magnificent creature? It was a grand gesture, a promise of protection, skill, and, let's be honest, bragging rights. But there's a catch, or rather, several. Falconry wasn't just a free-for-all where anyone with a bird could play. Oh no, the medieval world was all about hierarchy and control. Enter the hawking laws, the legal framework that dictated who could fly which birds. These laws were as intricate as they were strict, ensuring that social order was maintained even in the skies. Royals got the crème de la crème, gyre falcons, the largest and most prized of all. Nobles might fly peregrines, while a mere yeoman could be limited to kestrels. Talk about avian apartheid. And how were these laws enforced? With the sort of over-the-top penalties that make modern parking fines look like a slap on the wrist. If a commoner was caught with a bird above their station, they might face fines, imprisonment, or even the loss of a hand, because nothing says, stay in your lane, quite like medieval justice. It was a system designed to reinforce the feudal status quo, ensuring that everyone knew their place, even in the realm of falconry. Now, let's not forget the role these birds played in diplomacy. In a world without emails or Zoom calls, face-to-face meetings were key, and what better icebreaker than a shared love of falconry? Kings and lords used hunts as a pretext for negotiation, bonding over the thrill of the chase before diving into the nitty-gritty of politics. A successful hunt could set the tone for successful treaties, while a failed one might foreshadow diplomatic disaster. It was a delicate dance, with birds of prey as the stars of the show. But here's where we bust another myth. The image of falconry as an egalitarian pastime where peasants and princes mingled in harmony. Sure, falconry had a communal aspect, but make no mistake, it was a world defined by strict social barriers. You might share a field with a nobleman, but that didn't mean you shared his table or his status. The birds might soar together, but their handlers walked very different paths. And yet, for all its complexities, falconry was undeniably seductive. Its allure lay not just in the hunt, but in the power dynamics it reflected and reinforced. In a society obsessed with hierarchy, falconry was a microcosm of the medieval world, a blend of skill, status, and spectacle. So, as you prepare to head out with your falcons, remember, you're not just hunting for game, but navigating the intricate web of medieval life. It's a world where a bird on your arm can be both a weapon and a symbol, where every flight carries the weight of tradition and ambition. The day is still young, and as you set out, the possibilities are as limitless as the sky itself. As you load your falcons into the back of a cart, think of it as a medieval mobile command center. It's time to hit the road for the main event, the hunt. The air is crisp, the countryside sprawling, and your heart beats with the anticipation of watching your feathered comrades dive and swoop in a display that's part ballet, part battlefield. But before we get too caught up in this avian Avengers moment, let's talk shop, the nitty-gritty of training these raptors and the species that star in this medieval drama. First up, the cast of characters. There's the peregrine falcon, the Usain Bolt of the bird world, reaching speeds over 240 km/h, 150 m fierce in a stoop. It's the darling of the noble class, not just for its speed, but its prowess in tackling mid-air targets. Then you have the goshawk, the medieval equivalent of a bouncer, powerful, robust, and perfect for hunting in wooded areas. It's the bird you call when you need the job done, no questions asked. And let's not forget the kestrel, the blue-collar worker of the falconry world, often seen hovering with that iconic tail twitch, catching voles and insects with an efficiency that would make any manager proud. Training these birds isn't just a matter of setting them free and hoping for the best. Oh no, it's a dance of patience, precision, and a fair amount of raw chicken. First comes the taming, gaining the bird's trust, which is a bit like trying to befriend a moody teenager. You spend hours with the bird on your glove, letting it get used to your presence and the world around it. You feed it by hand, teaching it that you're the key to its next meal. It's a process called manning, and it requires the patience of a saint, or at least someone with a lot of spare time. Once you've got the bird's trust, it's time for the real training, teaching it to hunt. This involves a series of increasingly complex exercises, from flying to your glove on command to chasing lures swung on long cords. The goal? To get the bird to associate your whistle or call with the promise of food. It's classical conditioning at its finest, long before Pavlov started ringing bells. And speaking of bells, those little jingles tied around the falcon's legs aren't just for show. They're crucial for tracking your bird once it's airborne. Lose sight of a falcon in the sky, and you're in for a long, lonely walk as you try to find it. Now, let's debunk a little myth, the idea that falconry was a serene, noble pastime, filled with leisurely afternoons and gentle pursuits. In reality, the hunt was a gritty, often brutal affair. Imagine trekking for miles over uneven terrain, your trusty falcon perched on your glove as you scan the horizon for prey. When the moment comes, it's a burst of adrenaline as you release the bird and watch it soar. The falcon's dive is a masterclass in physics, a breathtaking display of speed and precision as it homes in on its target. But the outcome isn't always picturesque. The prey might escape, or the falcon might catch it, leading to a flurry of feathers and a not-so-pleasant mess. It's nature red in tooth and claw, a reminder that medieval life was more about survival than spectacle. The ecological impact wasn't something medieval folks spent much time pondering, but we modern historians can't help but wonder. Falconry, like any hunting practice, had its effects on local wildlife populations. Overhunting could lead to declines in certain species, though in the grand scheme of medieval life, falconry was just one part of a larger tapestry of human-nature interactions. Still, it's a good reminder that every action has its consequence, even if you're just trying to put a pheasant on the table. As you wrap up the day's hunt, there's a sense of camaraderie among the falconers. Successes are celebrated, failures are commiserated, and there's always the promise of another hunt, another chance to send your falcon skyward. You pack up your gear, the sun casting long shadows over the fields, and head back home with stories to tell and, if you're lucky, a fresh catch to share. And so the life of a medieval falconer continues, a blend of skill, tradition, and a touch of the unpredictable. It's a world where the sky is both a stage and a battleground, where every flight is a testament to the bond between human and bird. As you return to the village, you're not just a hunter, you're part of a legacy that stretches back centuries, a tradition that is shaped and been shaped by the whims of nature and the quirks of human ambition. And as the day winds down, you find yourself looking forward to tomorrow's challenges, knowing that in this world of falconry, the sky's the limit. As the sun dips lower, casting golden hues across the landscape, let's trade the gritty realities of falconry for the shimmering allure of its myths and legends. Falconry wasn't just about the hunt. It was a cultural phenomenon that permeated the art and literature of medieval Europe in ways that would make even the Kardashians envious. These birds were the influences of their day, flapping their way into the imaginations of poets, painters, and storytellers. First, let's swoop into the glamorous world of medieval literature, where falcons were often portrayed as the feathered equivalent of a knight in shining armour. Take Geoffrey Chaucer's The Squire's Tale, part of his famed Canterbury Tales. Here, a magical falcon, a gift from an exotic king, symbolises noble virtues and courtly love. Why a falcon? Because, much like today's luxury brands, these birds represented a blend of rarity and prestige. Falcons were the Louis Vuitton of the animal kingdom, coveted and costly. But before you get too swept up in the romance, let's throw a reality check into the mix. The everyday falconer, like you, wasn't exactly living in a Chaucerian dream. Sure, there were moments of poetic beauty when a falcon soared against the sky, but there was also the not-so-glamorous business of cleaning up after them. Falcons were majestic, yes, but they were also messy, demanding creatures that required constant attention. It's a bit like owning a sports car, exhilarating on the road but a pain in the wallet and garage. Now, let's pivot to art, where falcons frequently perched in the frames of grand portraits and tapestries, serving as symbols of status and power. For the medieval elite, being painted with a falcon was akin to a modern-day CEO posing with a private jet. It shouted, "I've made it!" louder than a peacock in a hen house. The Book of Hours, a popular devotional text from the period, often featured nobles depicted with their prized falcons, underscoring the connection between these birds and divine favour. It was a visual shorthand for wealth, influence, and a touch of the divine right. In reality, though, the average medieval Joe was more likely to see a falcon in the sky than in his living room. These birds were expensive to maintain and even more costly to lose. Remember, falconry wasn't just a rich man's game, but it did require a sizable investment, both in time and resources. For many, just keeping a falcon alive and hunting was achievement enough. Forget the fancy portraiture. Let's not forget the legends and lore that wove falcons into the tapestry of medieval storytelling. One popular tale, from the Romance of Yvain, the Knight of the Lion, features a falcon as a central plot device, symbolizing both the hero's nobility and his quest for redemption. Falcons, in these stories, were often imbued with a kind of mystic wisdom, acting as guides or omens. They were the original spirit animals, long before anyone was talking about chakras or wellness retreats. However, the reality was less mystical and more mundane. Training a falcon was a mix of science and art, requiring detailed knowledge of avian behaviour and a lot of patience. It was about as mystical as a tax return, with the added risk of getting your finger bitten if you weren't quick enough with the food. Yet these stories persisted, painting falconry as an otherworldly pursuit, and in doing so they elevated the practice to near mythic status. The spread of falconry across Europe was fueled by these stories, each one adding a layer of allure and intrigue. The birds were seen as ambassadors of sorts, spreading culture and prestige wherever they flew. Monarchs exchanged falcons as diplomatic gifts, much like we might trade state secrets, valuable, treasured, and occasionally used to broker peace or declare war. In 1214, Emperor Frederick II of the Holy Roman Empire was so enamoured with falconry that he penned a treatise, De Arte Venandi cum Avibusul, the art of hunting with birds, which became the go-to manual for aspiring falconers. Talk about leaving a legacy. But here's a twist. While falconry's allure was undeniable, it was also a source of tension. The hawking laws, remember those? They weren't just about keeping the social order. They were a reaction to the growing popularity of falconry that threatened to blur class lines. As more people sought to emulate the nobility, authorities clamped down, ensuring the pastime remained exclusive. It was a classic case of the haves versus the have-nots, with falcons as the feathered gatekeepers. In essence, the myths and legends surrounding falconry were both a blessing and a curse. They elevated the practice to the stuff of dreams, while simultaneously fueling a desire that many could not fulfill. The result? A cultural phenomenon that was as much about aspiration as it was about reality. Falconry wasn't just a hobby. It was a symbol of everything people wanted to be: noble, powerful, and free. As you head back from the day's hunt, the stories you've heard echo in your mind. They remind you that while falconry's legends are enchanting, the true magic lies in the bond between human and bird. It's a relationship built on trust and skill, not just tales and tapestries. And as you step into the village, the falcon perched on your glove, you're a living testament to that enduring legacy, a blend of myth and reality, history and herstory, all rolled into one. The day may be winding down, but the journey of falconry is far from over, with more stories waiting to unfold under the medieval sky. As you saunter back into the village, falcon securely on glove, you can't help but muse on the legacy of this ancient art. You see, falconry didn't just flap its wings into history and disappear. It left an indelible mark, although the winds of change eventually clipped its feathers. Enter the game changer, gunpowder. You can thank the late Middle Ages for this explosive development, literally. As firearms began to boom their way across Europe, they rendered falconry less practical. Why spend years training a bird when you could just point and shoot? It was like trading a classic vinyl collection for a shiny new iPod, convenient sure, but lacking the soul. But let's not lay all the blame on gunpowder. Social structures were shifting too. The feudal system that so rigidly defined who could fly what bird was crumbling. As the middle class rose, so did the demand for less labour-intensive forms of entertainment. Falconry was, quite frankly, a lot of work, and as the pressures of urban life increased, spending hours in the countryside with a feathery diva perched on your arm was a luxury fewer could afford. Yet, here's the kicker, falconry never truly died out. Like a phoenix, it reinvented itself. Fast forward to today, and you'll find modern falconers keeping the tradition alive, albeit with a conservation twist. Falconry is now about preserving species and rehabilitating injured birds. It's a fascinating irony, an ancient hunting sport turned guardian of wildlife. In the United States alone, there are roughly 4,000 licensed falconers. While it's not the medieval juggernaut it once was, falconry still captures the imagination, proving that some legends refuse to fade. So why does this ancient practice still resonate? Well, for one, it's a reminder of our connection to nature. In a world increasingly dominated by screens and concrete, falconry offers a tactile, visceral link to the natural world. It's a dance with the wild, a reminder that we're not as removed from nature as we might think. And let's face it, there's something undeniably cool about commanding a bird of prey. Moreover, falconry teaches us about patience and dedication qualities in short supply in our instant gratification culture. Training a falcon isn't a weekend project, it's a commitment that demands time and tenacity. It's a bit like learning to play a musical instrument, but with more feathers and fewer recitals. And let's not forget the thrill of the hunt, the adrenaline of watching a falcon stoop at breathtaking speeds, a spectacle that no amount of CGI can replicate. But perhaps the most compelling reason falconry endures is its blend of romance and reality. It's the stuff of legends, yet grounded in the grit of daily life. It speaks to our desire for mastery, both over nature and ourselves. It's about control and surrender, power and partnership. In falconry, we see a reflection of our own struggles and triumphs, the eternal dance between freedom and constraint. As you wrap up your day and return your falcon to its perch, you contemplate what this ancient art reveals about medieval life. Falconry was a microcosm of the society that cherished it, a world of hierarchy and aspiration, of myth and survival. It was a pastime that could elevate a person's status or simply put food on the table. It was an art form that demanded skill and patience, a symbol of power and prestige. And while the world has changed dramatically since those medieval days, the lessons of falconry remain timeless. In essence, falconry is a testament to the human spirit. It's a reminder that even in the face of change, some things endure. It's a legacy woven from feathers and dreams, a story that continues to unfold as long as there are skies to soar and hearts to dream. So as you bid farewell to the medieval twilight, remember that while falconry's heyday may have passed, its spirit soars on, carried by the winds of history and the wings of imagination. The first light of dawn peeks through the cracks in your thatched roof, and the chill of the morning air greets you like an old, unwelcome friend. It's the start of another day in first-century Ireland, where the sun's ascent marks the beginning of your work as a Celtic blacksmith. You might not be forging Excalibur, but make no mistake, your role is vital. Iron is the new gold, and you are the alchemist who transforms it, not into leaden tales of glory, but into tools and weapons that shape everyday life. Now, let's talk economics. Think of the blacksmith as the unsung hero of the ancient supply chain. You are nestled at the heart of the community, probably in a ring fort, which is essentially a fortified farmstead. Your forge is more than just a place of work, it's a hub of activity. People rely on you for everything from sickles to swords. Without you, the community would be stuck using wooden tools, which, let's face it, are about as effective as a spoon in a sword fight. Iron, compared to the glitzy allure of gold, was practical. It was the stuff that got things done. In the harsh reality of ancient Ireland, practicality trumped bling. A single iron axe could cost a pig, which was a significant investment. But consider the payoff. With that axe, a farmer could clear land, build shelter, and feed a family. So, in a way, you're not just a blacksmith, you're a catalyst for progress. Here's a juicy myth to bust. The image of the solitary blacksmith, hammering away in isolation with only the fire for company, is more Hollywood than historical. In reality, you're part of a bustling, collaborative scene. You've got apprentices and maybe even a few journeymen if you're lucky. The forge is alive with the sound of clanging metal, the hiss of steam, and the chatter of helpers. It's not just a job. It's a community effort. Everyone has a role, from stoking the fire to sharpening the tools. You might even trade secrets with other blacksmiths, because in this line of work, knowledge is power, and it's not just dragons that hoard it. Your work is impacted by the tides of politics and society. The 1st century is a time of tribal warfare and alliances in Ireland. Each tool or weapon you create is a piece of the larger puzzle. Your craftsmanship can influence the balance of power. When a chieftain commissions a new spearhead, it's not just about the payment in cattle or grain. It's about how that weapon might tip the scales in the next skirmish. In a world where disputes are often settled by the sword, your work could very well decide who sits on the wooden throne next. And let's not overlook the fact that blacksmithing is a dangerous gig. You're working with fire and iron after all. There's nothing romantic about a burn or a missed strike. But there's a certain thrill in it too, a kind of dance with the elements. You're wielding the power of transformation, turning raw iron into something functional, sometimes beautiful, always essential. It's as if you're in a constant conversation with the metal, negotiating form and function with each strike of the hammer. But back to the here and now. As you rise and prepare for the day, you know that each piece you create today, whether it's a ploughshare or a blade, is a link in the chain of survival and societal structure. You're not just shaping metal, you're shaping the world you live in. That's the real magic, and it's a far cry from the romanticized tales of lone artisans. You're part of a tradition that builds, defends, and sustains the community around you, and that's a legacy worth waking up for, even in the chill of an early Irish morning. As you roll up your sleeves and get to work, let's dig into the nitty-gritty of your craft. You're about to embark on an ancient ritual of iron smelting, turning raw earth into malleable metal. This is no small feat. Imagine trying to wrangle a dragon with nothing but your wits and a bit of charcoal. You've got a furnace, essentially a clay and stone oven, where temperatures need to hit a scorching 1200 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than a midsummer argument over whose cow wandered onto whose land. The process starts with bog iron, Ireland's gift from the marshy gods. This stuff doesn't look like much, just clumps of earthy deposits you'd probably overlook on a hike, but it's the lifeblood of your trade. You and your helpers gather this ore, and it's a team effort. Everyone from the local kids to the elders pitches in, because more hands mean more iron, and more iron means more tools and weapons for the community. Once you've got your bog iron, it's time to fire up the furnace. This is where your apprentice earns his keep, fanning the bellows like he's trying to put out a particularly stubborn birthday candle. And here's where our modern safety inspectors would have a field day. Forget goggles, gloves, or even a basic fire extinguisher. You've got nothing but calloused hands and a healthy respect for fire. It's a miracle anyone made it past age 30. As the iron heats, it transforms into a bloom, a glowing, spongy mass that's as hot as the latest gossip in the village. You wrestle it from the furnace and start hammering away, coaxing it into something usable. The sound is deafening, a clanging symphony that echoes through the ringfort. It's hard, sweaty work, and the physical demand is no joke. If modern manufacturing is a well-oiled machine, blacksmithing is more like a chaotic dance, where every step could end in either triumph or disaster. Here's the kicker. The whole process is as much about feel as it is about skill. There's no precise science to it, no digital readouts or computer models. You're relying on instinct and experience. Every strike of the hammer, every twist of the metal is a conversation between you and the material. And, like any good conversation, it's part art, part negotiation. Let's Talk shop forging tools and weapons isn't just about brute strength. It's about precision, patience, and a fair bit of cunning. You might be fashioning a spearhead today, a plowshare tomorrow. Each piece requires its own technique, its own rhythm. You know the weight and balance of a blade by heart, and you can tell a good edge from a bad one just by the way it catches the light. Now, on to the economics of it all. Iron is costly, not just in terms of materials, but in time and labour. A single weapon or tool can take days to complete, and that's if everything goes smoothly. The cost isn't just measured in pigs or cattle, but in the energy spent, the resources consumed. We're talking the ancient equivalent of a modern-day factory running on overtime. Yet, despite the cost, the demand never wanes. Why? Because iron tools are the backbone of survival. A well-made axe, or a sturdy knife, can make all the difference between thriving and merely surviving. That's why people are willing to barter their prized livestock or precious grain. It's a trade-off between short-term sacrifice and long-term gain. And let's not forget the political angle. Every piece you forge has the potential to change the balance of power. A well-armoured chieftain can hold sway over his rivals, and that's not just a local legend, that's realpolitik in action. The tools and weapons you create could very well decide the outcome of the next skirmish or the latest land dispute. While we're on the subject of myths, let's address the archetype of the blacksmith as some solitary wizard forging in isolation. It's a romantic image, sure, but like most legends, it's more fiction than fact. In truth, blacksmithing is a communal effort. You've got apprentices, helpers, maybe even a rival or two. The forge is a place of learning, of shared knowledge, where secrets are swapped like coins at the market. It's a bustling, noisy hub, where even the village gossip finds its way into the rhythm of the day. So, as you hammer away, remember that you're part of a larger tapestry. You're not just crafting iron, you're crafting the future. Each stroke of the hammer is a step forward, a link in a chain that binds the past to the present. And while the work is grueling, there's a certain satisfaction in knowing you're shaping more than just metal. You're shaping destiny itself, one fiery strike at a time. As the morning stretches on and the sun climbs higher, you pause to wipe the sweat from your brow. There's still much to do, and the day is only just beginning. But for now, take a moment to appreciate the symphony of sounds around you. The hiss of steam, the chatter of your helpers, the rhythmic clang of metal on metal. It's the heartbeat of your world, and it's a beat that will continue to echo through the ages. As the sun inches its way to the zenith, casting a golden glow over the ring fort, you take a moment to soak it all in. The forge is alive with the rhythm of work, a heartbeat of the community that pulses with each strike of the hammer. But beyond the clamour of iron and fire lies another layer to your life as a blacksmith, the social and political tapestry that weaves through every corner of your world. You see, being a blacksmith in first-century Ireland isn't just about fashioning tools and weapons. It's about wielding influence in a society where every decision can tip the scales of power. Now, let's not mince words. Your status in the tribe is a bit like being a rock star, but with more soot and fewer groupies. You're the one who turns raw materials into the essentials of survival, and that gives you a certain clout. In a world where survival hinges on the sharpness of a blade or the sturdiness of a plough, the person who crafts these items holds a special place in the social hierarchy. You're not just a tradesman, you're a linchpin in the community's ongoing tale of survival. But this isn't just about practical necessity. There's an aura of mystique that surrounds your work. To the untrained eye, turning bog iron into a sleek, deadly sword is akin to sorcery, and who can blame them for thinking so? The forge is a place of elemental transformation, fire, air, and earth, combining to create something greater than the sum of its parts. It's no wonder that blacksmiths were often seen as wielders of magic, akin to wizards with a hammer. This perception adds another layer to your influence. an intangible power that extends beyond the tangible products of your labor. Politically, the stakes are high. Tribal leaders and chieftains rely on your craftsmanship to equip their warriors for battle. Each weapon you create could play a pivotal role in the next tribal skirmish or alliance, and that's not just idle speculation. The historical records are clear. Celtic tribes were fierce warriors, and their success in battle often hinged on the quality of their arms. A well-crafted spear or sturdy shield could mean the difference between victory and defeat, and by extension, the power dynamics within and between tribes. Let's not forget the strategic use of blacksmithing in warfare. It wasn't just about outfitting warriors with weapons, it was about showcasing technological prowess. A tribe with superior weaponry didn't just have a tactical advantage, it commanded respect and fear. It's a bit like having the latest smartphone today. It's not just about what it does, but what it represents. In a world where might often made right, being the blacksmith who could produce the finest weaponry made you a player in the Game of Thrones, Iron Age edition. And here's a nugget of irony for you. While you're busy shaping the instruments of war, your forge also serves as a place of peace and diplomacy. Chieftains and warriors alike gather at your workshop, not just to commission new weapons, but to discuss alliances, negotiate disputes, and exchange news. The forge is a hub of information, a place where the latest gossip is as valued as the sharpest sword. It's a reminder that even in times of conflict, there's a need for dialogue and cooperation, a reality as true today as it was back then. But let's not get too romantic about it. The reality is that your influence comes with its own set of challenges. For one, there's the constant demand for your skills, which means long hours and hard labor. And then there's the pressure to maintain your status, to keep producing work that meets the ever-growing expectations of your patrons. It's a high-wire act, balancing the practicalities of your craft with the social and political pressures of the day. There's also the matter of competition. You're not the only blacksmith in town, and while there's camaraderie among your fellow craftsmen, there's also rivalry. Each blacksmith vies for the favor of the powerful, and that means constantly innovating, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible with iron and fire. It's a reminder that even in a cooperative community, there's room for ambition and the pursuit of excellence. So, as you take a breather in the midday sun, remember that your work extends far beyond the anvil and hammer. You're a key player in the social and political fabric of your tribe, a craftsman whose influence is felt in the halls of power and the fields of battle. It's a heavy responsibility, but it's also a testament to the vital role you play in shaping the world around you. And as the afternoon unfolds, with its own set of challenges and opportunities, you know that each piece you create is a testament to your skill, your resilience, and your crucial place in the grand tapestry of history. In the grand scheme of things, your role as a blacksmith is about more than just survival. It's about legacy. The tools and weapons you forge today will become the artifacts of tomorrow, the tangible remnants of a bygone era that tell the story of a people and their way of life. And while the romanticized image of the blacksmith may persist in popular imagination, the reality is far more complex and compelling. It's a story of power and politics, of community and competition, of art and alchemy. And it's a story that continues to unfold with each strike of the hammer, each spark from the forge, each word spoken in the heat of the midday sun. As the shadows lengthen and the day wears on, your thoughts turn to the tasks ahead. There's always more work to be done, more iron to be shaped, more fires to be stoked. But for now, take a moment to appreciate the role you play in this intricate dance of history. You're not just a blacksmith, you're a creator of destiny, a shaper of futures, a master of the elements. And that's a role worth embracing, even as the demands of the day continue to call. And speaking of embracing roles, let's dive headfirst into the cauldron of myths and legends that swirl around your work. The afternoon sun casts long shadows that dance along with the tales of magic and mystery associated with Celtic blacksmiths. These stories are like the ancient version of viral tweets, capturing imaginations with vivid images of enchanted armors and swords that gleam with supernatural power. But before you start imagining yourself as the Merlin of metallurgy, let's separate the fact from the fiction. First up, the legendary swords. Every culture seems to have its own Excalibur, a weapon of unparalleled power, forged in the heart of a volcano by a blacksmith with a grudge against the gods. In Celtic lore, we have stories of swords like Caladbolg, a blade said to be so powerful it could slice off the tops of hills. Now, I hate to burst your bubble, but the only thing your Celtic counterpart is lopping off is a chunk of the local oak tree. You see, the reality was more down to earth. These swords were made for real-world battles, not for staging a one-man deforestation campaign. The magic, if you can call it that, lay in the craftsmanship. Blacksmiths had to master the art of pattern welding, a technique that involved twisting and folding iron rods to create a blade that was both flexible and strong. If this sounds like a lot of work, that's because it is. It's the Iron Age equivalent of crafting a samurai sword requiring skill, patience, and a steady hand. The result was a weapon that was as much a work of art as it was a tool of war. So, while there was no actual magic involved, the skill it took to create these blades was nothing short of wizardry. Let's not forget the enchanted armor. Celtic lore is replete with tales of cuirasses that could turn aside any blade, helmets that rendered their wearers invisible, and shields that could deflect entire armies. The truth is a bit more mundane but no less impressive. Celtic smiths were masters of the craft, using techniques like riveting and embossing to create armor that was both durable and intimidating. A well-made helmet could save a warrior's life in battle, but it wouldn't make him invisible. Unless, of course, he was hiding behind a rock. Now, why all the embellishment? Why did people spin these fantastical tales about blacksmiths? Well, part of it is human nature. We love a good story, especially one with a little magic thrown in. These legends served as a way to inspire warriors and instill a sense of awe and reverence for those who wielded such weapons. They also acted as a kind of ancient propaganda, elevating the tribe's status and reputation across the land. After all, who wouldn't think twice about attacking a tribe whose blacksmiths allegedly had a hotline to the mystical realm? But there's another layer here. These stories also reinforce the blacksmith's position in society. By associating their craft with magic and mystery, blacksmiths were elevated from mere artisans to figures of power and influence. They became keepers of secrets, custodians of ancient knowledge. It's a bit like being the only person in town who knows how to fix a Wi-Fi router, except your neighbors are more likely to offer you a cowl than a cup of coffee. And let's not overlook the practical side. These myths had a way of keeping people in line. If you believed your blacksmith had the ear of the gods, you might think twice before shortchanging him on that new sword. It's a bit like the medieval version of a Yelp review, except instead of stars you get swords, and instead of a bad review you might get cursed. Of course, not everyone bought into the hype. There were skeptics, just as there are today, who viewed these stories as little more than tall tales. But even those skeptics couldn't deny the skill and artistry that went into the creation of Celtic weapons and armour. The craftsmanship alone was enough to inspire a kind of reverence, even without the added layer of myth. And here's the kicker. While these tales were often exaggerated, they weren't entirely without basis. The blacksmiths of ancient Ireland were indeed capable of remarkable feats. The process of smelting, forging and shaping metal was a complex one, requiring a deep understanding of materials and techniques. It was a blend of science and art, of trial and error, of knowledge passed down through generations. In a way, that's its own kind of magic, a magic rooted in human ingenuity and craftsmanship. So, as you stand at your forge, hammer in hand, remember that you're part of a long tradition. You're not just crafting weapons, you're crafting legends. Each piece you create is a testament to the skill and creativity of those who came before you and those who will come after. It's a reminder that while the stories may be embellished, the core of them, the skill, the artistry, the dedication, is very much real. As the afternoon stretches on and the shadows grow longer, take a moment to appreciate the role you play in this tapestry of myth and reality. You're not just a blacksmith. You're a guardian of tradition, a creator of legends, a master of elements. And while the demands of the day may call, remember that each strike of your hammer echoes with the stories of the past and resounds with the promise of the future. The day's work is far from over, and as you prepare to tackle the next task, you do so with the knowledge that you're not just shaping metal, you're shaping history. And that, dear friend, is a legacy worth forging. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long amber shadows over the ring fort, you take a moment to consider the legacy of your craft. It's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture when you're knee-deep in the day-to-day grind of iron and fire. But as a Celtic blacksmith, you're not just making tools and weapons, you're laying the groundwork for technological progress that will echo through the ages. Talk about leaving a mark. Let's rewind the clock a little. The Celtic blacksmiths of 1st century Ireland were the unsung pioneers of metallurgy. They didn't have the luxury of modern chemistry or metallurgy handbooks, but what they did have was an intuitive understanding of their materials. They were early adopters of iron smelting and forging techniques, skills so pivotal they make the difference between living in the Stone Age and stepping into the Iron Age. Without these advances, we'd probably still be trying to figure out how to hunt dragons with sharpened sticks. Now, let's get into some hard facts. The transition from bronze to iron wasn't just a casual switch like swapping out last year's smartphone for the latest model. It was a seismic shift, akin to humanity's leap from horse-drawn carriages to Teslas. Bronze had its charms, but iron was the real game-changer. It was stronger, cheaper, and more abundant. While bronze required tin, which had to be imported from far-off lands like Cornwall, iron could be found in local bogs, handy if you're living in soggy Ireland. And here's a number to chew on. Iron production increased tenfold from 800 BC to 100 AD. That's a lot of swords and ploughshares. The impact of this metal revolution was monumental. Iron tools made farming more efficient, which in turn supported larger populations and more complex societies. The Celtic tribes you were equipping could expand their territories, farm more land, and support larger communities. In many ways, you were the original social network, connecting people through the power of iron. Sure, it wasn't exactly a viral TikTok, but the reach of your work was profound. Now, let's debunk another myth, the notion that blacksmiths were mere tradesmen. In reality, you were the industrialists of your time. Your forge was a microcosm of what would eventually become massive manufacturing enterprises. The principles you used, specialization, workflow management, and quality control, are the same ones that would later power the Industrial Revolution. So, next time you're feeling down about the soot under your fingernails, remember that you're the spiritual ancestor of every factory worker and assembly line operator out there. Henry Ford owes you a pint. Moving forward in time, the legacy of Celtic blacksmiths extends beyond the Iron Age. Their spirit of innovation laid the groundwork for future advancements. The techniques honed over countless hours of hammering and smelting evolved into the sophisticated metallurgy of the Middle Ages. Without the foundation you provided, the world might have never seen the gleaming suits of plate armor or the elegant lines of a Renaissance rapier. Your work planted the seeds of progress that would blossom into the technological marvels of later eras. But enough about the past, let's talk about the present. In today's world, blacksmithing might seem like a quaint hobby, something you do in your backyard between bouts of binge-watching period dramas. Yet, the principles remain the same. Modern blacksmiths, armed with power hammers and plasma cutters, still draw from the same well of ingenuity and craftsmanship you did. They continue to blend art with function, creating pieces that range from the practical to the purely decorative. It's a testament to the timelessness of the craft that, even in a world dominated by digital technology, the sound of hammer on anvil still resonates with a deep, primal appeal. And let's not overlook the cultural fascination with blacksmiths. Hollywood loves a good blacksmith character, usually as the wise mentor or the rugged hero. While the reality is far less glamorous, more blisters than biceps, the allure remains. There's something about the elemental nature of the work, the transformation of raw material into something useful and beautiful, that continues to capture our imagination. As we wrap up our journey through time, it's worth reflecting on what all this means. The legacy of Celtic blacksmiths isn't just about the physical objects they left behind. It's about the spirit of innovation, the relentless pursuit of excellence, and the ability to adapt and thrive in an ever-changing world. It's a legacy of resilience and creativity that continues to inspire, reminding us that even the most humble of crafts can shape the course of history. So as you hang up your apron and let the forge's embers die down for the night, take pride in the fact that your work is part of a grand tradition. You're not just a craftsman, you're a builder of worlds, a creator of futures. And that's a legacy worth forging, one fiery strike at a time.